It's Blair Johnson with the Badass Records podcast, wishing you a happy first week of October. Want to remind you that new episodes drop Thursdays. You can follow the podcast at badassrecordspodcast.com, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or subscribe where you stream your audio. If you'd like to do an in-person episode with me here in Kansas City, hit me up at badassrecordspodcast@gmail.com. And that is all I got for you today. Thank you for stopping by. Hope you enjoy the show. Episode 85 is coming out this week, I think. So I think this will be episode 86.
Okay.
Badass Records podcast, hanging out with Krysztof Nemeth. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you,
Good,
sir?
good. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Not necessarily just down the street, but as you mentioned, maybe good to get out and about and
Absolutely.
Get some fresh air. And there were folks at my son's baseball game last night complaining. Somebody's talking about people that were complaining at the Chiefs game about the heat. And their response to them was, in 2 weeks,
that's right,
it's going to be cold.
Just take a dive.
It's always...
Appreciate it now.
I don't know. It's like, I've always been, prefer the cold because you can put more, but when it's 100, I can't do anything to stop my nutsack from sticking to my inner thigh.
It's bad.
And sweating through t-shirt and just being like,
it's miserable.
Yeah, the air feels hot and ACs just run and run. And and then summer kind of starts to fade away and it's like, wait, not yet.
Yep.
And then it's nice and you're like, oh, cool. And then it's like, oh man, now
it's that perfect weather at between summer and winter for 6 weeks if we're lucky. And same at the spring, and then it's miserable the rest of the time. So.
Yeah. Well,
it's Kansas City. It
is. Did you grow up here?
I did not.
Okay. Where are you from?
I was born in the East Bay in California.
Okay. Interesting.
And
is that near San Fran and Oakland?
Yeah, I was born in Oakland.
Okay.
And then lived in the towns around Oakland. Yeah, and Berkeley and Richmond and we were El Cerrito, so that area right there. And lived there for the first 10 years of my life.
Okay.
Still had family there, but then my mom married a guy in the Army.
Okay.
And so we started moving around a bunch.
Sure.
So first we moved to Seattle, then we moved to Orange County, and then we moved to, I finished high school in Alabama, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. And then moved back to California with the intent of going to college. Fucked that up. Then ended up here in Kansas City because my dad had they had transferred to Leavenworth, and so this was 92. I started going to art school at KCAI.
Okay, and
then when I finished school, so I was only here for like 4 years, but that was like prime Kansas City time, 92 to 96.
Sure. Yeah,
and then moved back to Seattle to try to get a job. Lived there for 12 years. My kid's mom and I split up, and we moved back to the Midwest in 2008.
Okay.
So I've been back here since.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Episode 8 featured a KCAI alum.
Oh, who was that?
Matt Barr. He's from Littleton. He moved here. Do you know him?
The name sounds really familiar. What year did he graduate?
Well, so I think we're the same age. So he and I. So 93 would have been when he graduated high school, and then came out. But then came out here for the fall of 93, 94. That would have been his first year.
Possibly. My wife might know him.
Okay.
Because my wife went to school at KCAI too, and she was a year behind me.
Okay. So I had 3 buddies, Matt Barr, and then Dave Bean, and then Josh Weaver. All were at KCAI for at least that 93, 94 year.
Okay. I'm going to ask Amy when I get home.
Right.
So it may be a blast to her past.
Right. I was talking to my future boss today, and he was like, so-and-so knows you, but I can't remember if she said that you guys went to kindergarten or first grade together. So what elementary school did you go to? And I was like, I went to 6. And he was like, 6 what? And I was like, elementary schools.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you know. But before we dig too far into some of your stuff, thank you again for being here.
Sure.
I know I'm reading a little bit too much into it, but and sort of just a quick glance, you kind of have like a handful of online IDs.
Oh yeah.
So you've got Names Without Frontiers.
Oh yeah, so I don't like to use my actual name on all my social stuff.
Okay, fair.
Because of the fact that my work doesn't necessarily know all the other things I'm into.
Okay.
And I don't want that to ever become an issue.
Right. And then
I also used to be a little bit more politically vocal on my thing, so I didn't want to use my real name.
Fair enough.
So the Instagram handle is, it's pronounced Boogeyman.
It looks like Bougie Man.
Well,
though.
And this is what's funny. We were talking about Steve Tulipano earlier. So Devo fans would recognize that reference. So they had a character named Boogie Boy.
Okay.
But it was always misspelled with a J, and they just kept it that way.
Okay.
So those in the know, if you know, you know.
Yes. So there's the little, what do you call those? The character that's part of the profile pic has a Devo hat or shirt on.
Yeah, my oldest kid, who's also a student at KCAI, on a whim decided to draw a picture of me, but from memory.
Oh,
and
cool!
So they drew me in a Devo shirt.
Nice.
So it's kind of like, until I change that, I got to keep the name.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So and then there's Emmaline Twist.
Yep.
Has its own thing too. Are you running that?
Yeah.
I think initially it was like I got a message on my personal and my band. I want to make sure, you know, and I didn't. It's just anybody that followed me. I'm like today.
Right.
I'm like, hey, thank you. Do you want to? Which can be productive, but also maybe seem a little feverish if you're double dipping. But Emmaline Twist has been around for 6-ish years.
I think we started in the winter of 2016.
Oh, okay. Gosh, so more like 7 going on 8. Okay. Well, there's a lot of other cool little tidbits just from the social media. The Instagram says post-punk, stargaze, and dark wave.
Yeah, so shoegaze is the term, but we have been finding ourselves doing less shoegaze and more post-punk.
Okay, interesting.
Recently,
sure.
Just as the band has evolved.
Yeah.
It started out a lot more slower and a lot more enveloping in our sound.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only guitar. Well, we have 2 guitar players in the band, but I was using it as a showcase to really kind of do some big atmospheric things with my guitar. But we just have kind of become more rock and roll, so it's really kind of taken more of a
now your
post-punk
baritone guitar.
Baritone guitar. That's correct.
I'm not familiar with the distinction between that and a regular old 6-string.
So a baritone is a 6-string guitar, only it's tuned down a fifth. So instead of it being at a scale where E is the key, standard key for a regular guitar, it's down to B.
Okay.
So it's tuned B to B, while a standard guitar is tuned E to E.
Sure. Okay.
And it's closer to the scale of a bass. I started out playing bass in high school. That was my first rock and roll instrument. And it's always been my main thing. And I learned how to play standard guitar. But when I found the baritone, that suddenly was me.
Sure.
And I found a baritone by accident.
I found my special purpose.
That's right. And it's longer than a regular guitar, but it's shorter than a bass.
Okay.
And but technically the sound range is kind of like how a cello fits into an orchestra between a violin and a bass.
Cool.
So
I like
a viola
that.
And a bass. So it's got a deeper sound. It's got a more resonant quality, and it just it sits in a mix differently than a standard guitar.
So I think of like Free Fallin', you know, it's kind of like a D and then just you add your pinky.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, and so that's kind of like that, sort of like the high end of chords sonically.
Right. Exactly.
But if you played those same notes on it would be a whole.
It would be like a fifth lower than that.
Which is not a whole note.
It's not a whole octave.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
You bring the glitter, I'll bring the doom.
Yeah. So it's a line from one of our songs, "Dead Heat," which hasn't been released yet. We've got it recorded. It was actually the first song we ever worked on as a band, and one of these days it will meet meet the ears of people in recording. It's recorded and it sounds amazing, but it's just waiting for its brethren to get done so we can release another record.
Nice. So whoever, are you in charge of all of the things? Cause it looks, if you hit the bio link on the Emmaline Twist, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you click that link, then a link tree opens up, and if you go, let's see, there was Black Site Records.
Oh yeah,
which lists there's a cool write up right there, and then there's 3 links down in the press section that all also go to Right Up the Pitch, iHeart Music, Big Takeover. It's all really clean copy.
Yeah.
Like whoever wrote those, that's a real person, right? It's not a.
Yeah. So are you talking about the links, the wording of the links, or the actual?
Well,
articles?
everything. I mean, so like, the Emmaline IG is nice and crisp and clean, and it's got good pictures. And then where that bio link takes you, which I think is the Black Site Record, like that's nice and clean. Everything just looks sharp, like nobody's half-assing anything.
Well, thank you. I don't like to half-ass anything.
Good.
And, the short answer is yes, I do most of that stuff.
Okay.
I've been playing in bands and having to do the promo of bands since I was a teenager. Okay. Right. As a teenager, I was getting into music. At the same time, I was getting into graphic design.
Nice.
Thinking that was going to be my career. So, I was designing flyers for my bands and writing promos and figuring this stuff out. Much like being a student of the music that you listen to, I always wanted to know how bands just did their stuff, right? Like, okay, so I know I need a promo pack because, you would try, especially in the 90s, you'd be like, well, how do I get a gig for my band? And you'd find out, oh, well, you need to write a promo pack, and you need to do this, and you need to have stickers, and you need to have all this stuff. So I just figured out how to do all that stuff.
Nice.
And so,
I think Steve said it's all about sometimes you just got to do stuff.
Oh, that's right. And that's what was fun about it, right? It's like there's no school that you could go to, although there probably should be, about how to be in a local band.
Right.
Right. And because there's always in the back of your mind that, oh, maybe we'll get discovered and somebody can do all this stuff for us. But that's just not the reality. And if you're going to be in control of how you come across in the world, you just got to take charge of it.
Well, I mean, and like, what are the odds that you're going to find someone and they're going to always do everything exactly the way that you? It's like hiring somebody to cut your grass.
Yeah.
It saves you the time, but you come home and you're like, really?
Well, as soon as somebody else's money is involved, they've got a say in it. And so, I grew up. I'm sure we're going to keep mentioning Steve tonight because he's been through this too, and to much more success than I've ever had. But figuring it out and doing it is because you have the passion to do it. You're like, I don't know how the fuck this thing works. Let me figure it out. And it's, you find people who've been successful at it. You see how they've done it. You're like, okay, they're doing this thing. Oh, you see on their merch tables, oh, they've done their photos like this, or where did you get your t-shirts printed, or who designed your website, and then you just start to figure out how to do that.
Right.
And so in every band I've ever been in, that's been me.
Hey,
I've been the guy.
Right.
and that said, Emmaline Twist is lucky in that we've got, out of the 5 members, 4 of us are designers.
Oh, wow.
So we'll just say, so like John, our drummer, is in charge of designing our set lists every night, and Meredith, our vocalist, they're in charge of, they've done a lot of posters for us, and sometimes, and then, so we all have an eye for it and can all contribute something to it. And so it's not just me. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's all Krysztof.
Right.
It's not.
But in other outfits in the past, you've worn that hat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, like any project, you've got people who you could collaborate with. Either, somebody's really good at, they don't mind making cold calls to venues, or these folks are lucky, they're able to go pick up the T-shirts one day, or help with the booking. And
sure,
it is very much, it needs to be a group effort. Right. Because otherwise it becomes, I've used this phrase in the past, it becomes like the little red hen, right? Like, who's going to help me bake the bread, right? We all benefit from the bread, so let's all contribute
I love that book.
To it. Yeah,
right? My kids are...
Oh, shit. I'm so sorry.
You're all good.
There's an edit for you.
No, but good. That's a good analogy, the little red hen. And, I think if we're all benevolent folks, especially in something like a band, a lot of benevolence, a lot of faith, a lot of trust, as much as we would like to see ourselves start at the highest peak of that and stay with it, eventually, something is going to be like a little bottled up, and some friction will happen, and you'll all of a sudden people will be like, "Whoa, man!" You're like, "I've been doing all that," you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like any relationship, really. And you've got the joke amongst a lot of musicians is you're married to 4 or 5 people,
right?
And so it's like, you got to work it out.
Yeah.
And every band I've had people come at me about stuff, and I've done the same thing back.
Sure.
But when you know it's worth it, you want to find those places for compromise.
Right.
And figure out how to make it work, because, there's magic when you get the right people together. Yeah. And I'm so lucky with that with Emmaline Twist. And, this is actually the longest band I've ever been in.
Okay.
And we're all good friends.
Cool.
And we've been to each other's weddings. We've been to each other's family events, right? And we're very, it's a wonderful thing. And especially through the pandemic, we were relying on each other a lot.
I bet.
There's still a support structure that happens there.
Sure.
And, we get together for practice on Tuesdays and spend 45 minutes just bitching about our jobs or something in life and everything. And then we rock out for a couple hours, and then we go back to bitching for a while. And it's cathartic, not only from a creative standpoint, but just from, adults need friends, and you need to be able to talk about stuff. And it's, the phrase around this particular group of people is, there's the family you choose. Right. And that's, we've chosen each other. Although sometimes they probably wish they hadn't chosen me. Because they're like, got this guy again. So I'm a little more intense.
Well, so. That's probably a role that is something of a necessity in an outfit that's serious and wants to do stuff and progress, and I had a musician on here that mentioned sort of the grind. Like, obviously life is the grind, but inside life's grind, if you're a musician, is your band's grind, or and so finding the time, whether it's changing always or if it's always Tuesday night or whatever, he realized that just getting together and just practicing wasn't enough to scratch the whole itch. So somebody suggested that they have a meal first, and then and he goes, game changer. And now it's like, not to sound cliche or cheesy, but we break bread before, and then it's just a real, which of course means, you're all taking away a meal time from all of your partners and spouses and whoever you.
Oh, they're all happy to get rid of us. No, that's a great idea, and I'm going to propose that to the band, because some of our best memories actually are, we're doing a show in another town and we're hanging out and we're having food and all this kind of stuff, and we've done it as a band when we're in a place where we don't have anybody else to hang out with. But
right.
I like that idea.
Well, he just, he was like, there's the obvious component being nourishment,
Mm-hmm.
and then it also sort of secretly allows you to be people first.
Yeah.
And not that you weren't before you got there,
right.
but be people together,
yeah.
and then do anyway.
I love that.
Yeah, it's cool notion. But so for folks that don't know, is the Emmaline Twist Instagram the best way to keep tabs on what you guys are up to, or is there another?
It is for that band.
Okay.
And we haven't even gotten into the fact that I'm in 4 other projects.
Man. Okay. Well, let's get to those in just a sec.
And we don't even have to. Emmaline Twist is the main band.
Well.
But it's
I'd
fun
like
to
if you're okay with
absolutely.
it. Absolutely. So the Emmaline Twist Bandcamp. I wasn't sure what the B/W Vega B/W Moon Eyes. What is the B/?
That's a so that was those 2 songs were released as a vinyl single.
Okay.
And so that's the terminology you use for the it's the 2 sides of the single.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a single with a B-side, sort of?
That's exactly right. Yep.
So from 2016, Dissimulation, an 8-track release from 2018,
That's
right?
correct.
Drugs, a single from 21, and then Aspera,
mm-hmm.
from a track from last year.
Yep.
So a lot of good stuff happening there. You said you kind of bounced around a little bit growing up. Do you have siblings?
I do.
Okay. How many and where are you?
I have one brother who is younger.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay. And then you said mom and dad split, and then somebody remarried?
Yeah. So my mother and natural father split when I was probably 4.
Okay. Any idea how they met?
They met because my mom and my natural father's sisters went to the same Catholic school in Berkeley.
Okay.
And that's how they met.
Okay.
Yeah. And they lived, oh, this is kind of funny actually, bringing music into it. They lived on a street in El Cerrito, the same street, 3 blocks from each other growing up, and right in the middle of between their homes was where John Fogerty grew up.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's an odd bit of trivia. But
that's funny.
Anyhow.
So mine, for 100 years,
mm-hmm.
I was like, I was 4 and you were 1 to my sister when our folks split.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, actually, I'm not. It's somewhere in the 4 to 7 range.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. Anyway, so you're kind of in that area where do you have memories of them under the same roof?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then so when they're living together, and then I'm assuming after they're not, you split time.
No, my natural father went off on his own life journey.
Gotcha.
Which is fine. I get it. They were young.
Yeah.
All is forgiven. It's not like,
sure.
any issue. My mom and in fact, my natural father's his parents, my grandparents, it was basically like we were just all still the same family.
Oh,
so
cool.
We grew
Nice.
up with them, which was wonderful. And my uncle was always a real strong person in my life. He was only 6 years older than me, so we were more like brothers anyway.
Okay, yeah.
And so I'm very grateful that we still had that connection. And my natural father and I reconnected probably over the past 10 years, and he still lives in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, if for however long they were together, were they playing music were they putting on music in the home? And then afterwards, so you're just with mom. Was she also?
Oh yeah, my mom was a huge music fan. So she was adopted as a kid, and her adopted father was a musician as well.
Okay.
And so music was my mom grew up learning the piano and guitar and singing.
Oh, nice.
She was like to be a folk artist in the 60s and everything. So music was always a thing. There's a picture of me someplace of, maybe being 3 or 4 and being given a David Cassidy plastic guitar.
Okay.
And that I would just strum. I didn't, it wasn't really made to make music, but took piano lessons, and then that turned into playing trumpet in the school band.
Cool.
And really excelling at that as a kid. And then somewhere in junior high, finding out that I actually had a real proclivity for rhythm instruments, like drums and stuff, and keeping a beat. And I don't know what that was, but in high school, I started playing bass.
Okay.
Because I wanted to be a rock star.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Because all the girls liked musicians.
Yeah.
And all the music I was listening to, they were effeminate goofball nerds like me. So it's just like, well, that's how I'm going to get the girl. Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to play rock music. And I really loved music. I mean, as a nerd kid in high school, that was what me and my friends and I just did. Devoured music, devoured it, and just became students of everything about every band that we listened to. And back then there was no internet, right? So it's just like you had to either find people who knew about it, or find weird fanzines, or read every bit of the liner notes you could, and make the associations, or hear from your friends. It was always who your friends knew.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And everybody was always trying to outdo each other.
Sure.
It's just like, you like them? Have you heard of these guys? And you'd make each other mixtapes, and you'd share them at parties, and that was the internet, right? That's how you did it.
My buddy, who's the GM at Up Down, said similar path, and he's like, I'm never going to be a better basketball player than you. I'm never going to be as handsome or sexy, but my music's always going to be cooler than yours.
That's right. It becomes a craft.
Yeah. So what sort of stuff was mom into? Did we already?
Oh, she liked everything. And she was very generous with what she allowed me to listen to.
Okay.
It was never, you shouldn't be listening to that.
Sure.
Because I brought some stuff into the house that they were like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And, but she was really into, and this is funny because my wife Amy's mom was kind of the same way. They liked music that was probably beyond what their social level would have indicated.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was always into artier stuff. She really loved the Moody Blues and the Beatles. Wow. And I mentioned John Fogerty earlier. His Creedence was all over the place. So stuff that was both really accessible and poppy, but also more experimental.
Okay.
I remember, every kid does this, right? You go in and you try to find the weird records in the record collection because they sound odd, right? So it was the White Album and whatever that Moody Blues record is.
The double. Did they have a double?
Yeah, it's the one that has the it probably has Nights in White Satin on it and Ride My Seesaw and all this other stuff on there. That there was a lot of spoken word on those records. Yeah,
and sometimes the mix was...
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden you're straining to hear...
That's right.
Shh, what?
Yep, that kind of stuff. So, it was like proto-prog rock that she was into. Yeah. But then in the late 70s, she started getting into more like the yacht rock and AM Gold And that stuff I had zero interest in. I'm like, Mom, why'd you stop listening to Pink Floyd?
Right.
And but people's tastes change as they get older, and that's what happened with her. But then in the '80s, when I was a teenager, it just all that's when it all happened.
Okay.
I just started finding.
Well, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
It's an area that really fascinates me. Like, so I really hate the redundancy element of hosting so much because
Sure.
I only have so many original thoughts,
right?
And then it's just pull the string and repeat.
Yep.
But the stuff that your folks or your mom or your dad, whoever it's kind of just part of the home. It's like furniture.
Yeah.
It's like there, and
Exactly.
then until you start to carve out your first step down a path toward your own taste and your own. So. Somewhere in between what you heard at home and the list that you gave me for today, was there a first album that you were in love with or that you bought or borrowed?
Yeah. So there was this weird period of time. Well, I was telling you that my mom started listening to stuff that I was like, I mean, this is shit like Bread and that kind of mellow gold stuff that I'm just like, surely there's something else in the world than this. So my cousin and my uncle, who were not much older than me, were really into, like, my cousin, and to this day, God bless him, he's still into like that second wave of British heavy metal.
Oh.
And so he was into all the hard rock.
Cool.
I found out about AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest.
Nice.
All that stuff.
At what age-ish?
I was probably 11 and 12.
Okay.
So this is prime Dungeons and Dragons years for a kid like me.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, fuck yes, we're going to listen to Judas Priest and play D&D.
Yeah.
And so I loved that stuff.
Nice.
I loved the heavy stuff, but I was also into Rush and Pink Floyd.
Okay.
Because my uncle, he was also into a lot of that same stuff, but he was also into the Talking Heads and the Police and Elvis Costello. And so I was like, well, what is this stuff?
Today, I think that he's going to be here.
Oh, I'm not surprised he comes back here pretty often.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Anyway.
Yeah. And so now I was getting that. And around at that same time, the rock radio was also playing the Police and U2 and stuff that was more guitar-driven, new wave stuff. And so I was starting to get this peek into other stuff.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, I love Black Sabbath, but there's also Devo happening. What is this? Right? So in junior high, there was started to be this transition happening between exclusively listening to hard rock and metal, and then we found this alternative, or we found this music magazine. This is when I was living in Seattle at this point, called The Rocket.
Okay.
And The Rocket didn't give shit about musical genre. They were just it was everything. So I remember picking up one of these magazines because maybe Rush was on the cover or something like that. But then there were ads from the record labels like, this new Devo record's coming out, or this new, Police album's coming out, or this.
That sounds
wonderful. Black Flag's going to be at the Palladium, or this kind of stuff, and we were like, well, what is this stuff? And then somebody mentioned the word punk rock, and we're like, what is that? And so you start to go to the record stores and seeing little glimpses of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, there's that Devo record. What's this hilarious thing called the Cramps? What is this, right? So you start to do this safari.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I'm gonna buy this because this is crazy looking. I always remember that Cramps record. It wasn't Stay Sick. Was it Bad Music for Bad People? The yellow one that has that really grotesque drawing on it. We were like, well, this kind of looks like Eddie from Iron Maiden. Maybe it sounds the same.
Nice.
It didn't, but
but
it appealed. Something about it appealed to us being weirdo kids.
Yeah.
We're like, whoa, this is weird.
Well, up like whatever steps your musical journey takes up to that point, like so much of it is happening on the other side of the horizon, right? Like you can't
Right.
You just hear what you hear on the radio. Maybe there's a handful of records in the house, or 8 tracks, or whatever. But it all definitely sort of feels similar, like the Beatles and the Stones and Led Zeppelin and the Who, and it's like obviously they're different and they have different sounds, but they sort of and until you start venturing into record stores or come across a magazine, you're like, oh shit, this was literally one thing in the haystack.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, the whole world opens up for sure.
That's really the case. And there was a Tower Records near where I was growing up, and it wasn't Seattle, it was Tacoma.
Okay.
Which was a pretty divey place at the time, and but there's a Tower Records, and we would always go in there, and it was back when they had Tower. Like a sister shop next door called Tower Posters, and it was really just a head shop.
and that happened to sell a few posters.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like Seventh Heaven for the kids out there listening today.
Don't say the B word.
Yes. And so we, so then we would see pictures of these bands too. We're like, who's that?
Where do they get those clothes?
Exactly.
Who cut their hair?
And suddenly you're like, oh, this is getting cool, right? You're starting to see more of this kind of stuff and making these connections. Is like, okay, these are punk bands, and these are synthesizer bands, and these are just alternative bands, and it's like this giant math equation. You're seeing these connections, and you're like, oh, this band is on this record label, and these guys were just on tour with this other band, and here's a local band that's doing something similar, and
it's like Homeboy solving the puzzles.
That's right.
Good Will Hunting.
That's exactly right.
Oh my God.
Yep. Or doing the strings between things. You start to make those connections. Yeah. And while kids who are into sports would have endless resources of television shows or radio shows or things that explained how this player
magazines,
was like this, and
newspaper articles.
This was more of this kind of a mystery to be solved. It's like, who are these bands?
Figuring out how to do stuff in a band, a similar.
I'm certain that's probably where I got that from. Right, where it's just like you're on your own trying to figure it out. You want to impress your friends. You want to impress the girls. You want to impress the kids at school.
Yeah.
And, so my friends group just started getting a little braver and braver in junior high because they already knew us as weirdo art kids who played D&D. But now we're like making murals in the art room that are album art from some of these weirdo bands. And, some kids didn't like it, but other kids were like, "Oh, what's this?" Right? Mm-hmm. So you became an ambassador for it.
Right.
Right.
Hey, go talk to Krysztof. He knows about these things.
Yep. Yeah. Precisely. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you the Cassidy guitar to trumpet to eventually bass.
Yes.
And how was it what was it that drew you to bass over a 6-string?
I'll tell you this. So I started out so I guess I was a freshman in high school, and I'm like, well, I want to learn how to play guitar because rock and roll. But I had a buddy that already played guitar, and I wasn't really good at it. And I'm like, I don't want to play chords. I want to play solos. I want to play leads. Mm-hmm. I want to play single note things because that's what I thought that a guitarist did. A rock guitarist. That's what I thought a rock guitarist did. So my guitar teacher was like, well, have you considered playing bass? And I'm like, I hadn't. And then when I got handed the bass, two very interesting things happened. So by now I'm living in Southern California. So I'm going to school. It's like 8th grade in 8th, 9th grade in Southern California. And that must have been it. So I'm learning how to play bass. And of course my teacher's teaching me how to play Green Onions and, just blues bass.
Sure.
And then one day I came in there and I'm like, this is the song I want to play. And I had it on a tape, and it was a Duran Duran song. It was Planet Earth.
Okay.
By Duran Duran, because I'd seen the video.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what this guy's doing, but I want to learn how to do it. and all the girls like him. So
that was
that's
another
gotta be good.
wild eye opener when MTV kind of exploded. It was just like sick addiction. To like, I don't want to go to school or go outside and be just all day and all night.
Because you're becoming educated.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With that. So of course he didn't know how. He couldn't hear from the tape because he was an old dude. He couldn't hear from the tape what was going on. He's like, well, let me see if I can find some sheet music.
Yeah.
So he found the sheet music to Save a Prayer, and that was the first song I learned how to play on bass.
Okay.
And that basically just set me on the path.
Interesting.
Now, soon after that, I'm playing bass and I'm, figuring it out for myself and everything. Soon after that, I get introduced to New Order.
Oh.
And I'd been, I shouldn't say be introduced to New Order. I'd listened to New Order, but I didn't ever, like they didn't have videos. There were New Order videos at the time. And because they were kind of like staunchly non-commercial at that time.
And did they come from previous outfits to form New Order or no?
Well, yeah. So it was Joy Division first, and then they became New Order. So, I'm starting to get into the kind of music that's going to start to get me into the goth realm. And so I guess it was like 84 or something. It's whenever the New Order Love Life album came out.
Okay.
Not Love Life, Low Life. Ugh. And they finally released a video. So it's the first time I've ever seen this band. And they're playing live in the studio, and I see how this guy is playing the bass. And it just blew my mind because he was playing the bass the way that I wanted to play the bass. He was playing up high, doing riffs. It was like the lead instrument. It just exploded my skull. Like 14. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to play bass like that. So I stopped taking lessons and just started learning because now I could see how someone was doing this. And so I would sit in my room and listen to the radio. You
gave up on the old man that delivered the wrong sheet music?
I did give up. I could still play Save a Prayer to this day.
There you go.
And many other Duran Duran songs because I started to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
I started to understand as I was getting better how this works. Okay, you play up here for this, you use a pick for that, you play down here when you would emphasize this part of the song. So studying the music I was listening to gave me the education of how to play. And so
the whole thing is just a do-it-yourself starter
precisely
kit. All of it.
Yep. And my parents bought me a bass amp, and I would sit in my room because I was highly unpopular at school. I'd sit in my room and listen to the evening show on KROQ in Los Angeles. And that DJ, I wish I could meet that DJ to this day.
Do you remember the call signal of the station?
It was KROQ 1067.
Nice.
1067.
Excellent.
And I think something like that.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to correct me. But the DJ in the evening, her name was Dusty Street, which is a totally contrived name. But she played all the stuff that they couldn't play during the day.
Cool.
So I started to hear, so this was the next step in the education. I started to hear Public Image Limited and Tones on Tail and Bauhaus and more gothy stuff and Fad Gadget and weird electronic stuff and Yellow and all this weird
Yellow
as
stuff. In boom boom boom.
Yes.
Nice.
Unfortunately, yes, it's the same band.
Sorry. That's the only reference.
Right, that's the only
no
song
W. They have
does.
no W.
Nope. YELLL.
Yeah.
But lots of synth pop, lots of other stuff.
Okay.
And so she played stuff that just was really turning me on. And so I would sit there in the evenings after my homework because I was a good student because I was a nerd and play bass to these songs and figure it out.
Wow.
And just listen. And then I would buy the records and I would play every song on these records and learn how to play everything.
You had the discipline to put in the hours.
Well, I didn't have a life. I was just a kid. I didn't have a car. I didn't have anywhere to go.
Look at. I mean, whether you thought that then or now, or you think it now retrospectively, the way that you're expressing that is to like smash the value down because you were a nerd or whatever, But now, look at the skills it's given you. I mean,
precisely.
And the knowledge and the probably countless experiences. So whatever to the categorization then, I mean.
Oh, yeah. No, it's fun. It is funny to look back on because, it really was, I didn't have anything else. And I often talk to
But you could have been not productive or not constructive, lazy.
Yeah.
Watch TV and snack and
could have just done shit for nothing.
Comic books.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, but I was just so fascinated with what being a musician was. Like, because these people were doing, there was obviously some connection, whether it was the music, the way they dressed, what they were singing about. There's obviously a romanticized idea of what being in a band was.
Yep.
It's just like, oh, certainly they're getting paid millions of dollars to do nothing but fuck off and play guitar. And so, because again, you don't know what the reality is. You're just like, oh, that sounds cool. And, so I guess I was in my first proto band was some other kids at my high school. One kid had, his parents was trying to keep him off of drugs, so they bought him a bunch of music gear, and they bought him a synthesizer and a little Dr. Rhythm drum machine and an amplifier. And so we were like, oh, I play bass. We can do an OMD cover band or something like that, right? Cool. We're like, let's make some synth pop music.
I mean,
that's what we did.
Kind of ingenious for, like I said, I have a soon-to-be teenager and a son that's not too far behind. Like, I could only hope and pray that, they could make lemonade out of a lemon, and not just go the direction that your parents don't want you to go. You know what I mean?
Well, I always looked at it as, I'm going to get more out of this if I just concentrate on it rather than, because I had plenty of friends and acquaintances who were already screwing up their lives as 14-year-olds.
Man.
And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm having more fun playing music.
Yeah, cool.
And the potential there.
Jeez.
So
you said, I believe a few minutes ago, that along the path of learning to play the bass, that you learned that there are times to play with a pick and times not to.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
That absolutely.
Now, Dane Bridges was on a few, he plays bass in Chowk. He was on a few episodes ago, and he, I think, said that, it's without question, no pick is the way to go, which when he said that stung me because my favorite bassist always plays with a pick and has said, I like playing with a pick because it enables me to silence notes easy when I want to silence them. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, conflicting. And now you're like, it's both. I'm like,
It is both. It really just depends on the technique and the style of music you're going for. In Emmaline Twist, there would never be a song that we're not using a pick on the bass.
Interesting.
And Kristen and I talk about this all the time.
Okay.
She comes from a line, being a punk rock bass player and playing with the fingers is just alien to her.
Okay.
But she knows how to rock that pick, and that's the sound, right? We work hard on. Well, she works hard. I don't do shit. She works hard on getting that sound and getting that texture and the rhythm. But that's why I asked her to be in the band, because she already knew that technique, and that was what I wanted to hear underneath my guitar.
Right.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, you're goofing around with your buddy who has the stuff, and you have the bass.
Yeah.
If you could walk me from there through your different bands up to Emmaline Twist, as long-winded or as brief as you want to be, it's totally up to you.
That's cool. I'll do that because it's actually kind of funny. So I was doing that in the garage at my friend's house. This would have been I was a junior in high school. Moved to Alabama.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Which the lemonade in that was finding some other musician kids. And so we basically, I played bass in a cover band that we had. And we did everything from school talent shows to parents' parties or parent parties at kids' house when the parents weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
We even played at a frat house.
Nice.
Because there was a college in that town, and just basically honed our chops as musicians.
Cool.
A bunch of these kids.
What were some of the most fun covers that you remember?
Oh, geez. We played a couple of Cure songs. We played a couple of U2 songs.
Wow.
We played some R.E.M. songs. We played Replacements. We played some punk stuff. Like we did some Generation X and Public Image stuff.
Gosh.
Which was, again, just unheard of that kids, especially in Alabama, would have been playing. But those kids had older siblings who were exposing them to this kind of music, and they just fell in love with
some
it.
of those the older siblings and the friends of the older siblings, if they ever bent an ear and they're like, look at these.
Yeah, that's exactly
Holy
right.
shit.
That's why we got
These
asked
kids
to
are
play
rad.
the frat houses. Because we were playing the college rock.
Right, yeah.
So then I moved back to California, kind of tried to get some musical things going. They never really worked. I mean, kind of, various bands with various people, but in Orange County and San Diego, where I lived during that time. But nothing really came of it other than, coffee shops and some bars, right? That was it. And then...
And you're, I would assume that across these moves, your mental health is fine. I mean, it sounds like you were resilient and adaptive.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of had to be. I went through some. I'm leaving gaping holes.
Okay,
in my
fair
history.
Fair enough.
But music was always the thing that like that's what I wanted to do, even if I had to have a regular job.
Right, but I mean, it's like you sort of build up a little thing in the music, and then now you're over here, and you do it again. And then like kids, people, there are people out there that might go through some things like that and become depressed, or give up, or feel like a failure, or it messes with their confidence.
Yeah, it never did that for me because I was just like, okay, well, that fell apart. I'm gonna start another band.
Cool,
because
awesome, man.
I was always getting better.
Nice.
Like my goal,
and you were aware of that,
right? Exactly. I'm like, well, now I'm better than I was in my last band. How can I push it to the next one?
Cool.
And then, so when I was in San Diego, I would get asked to play with other bands.
Fun.
Because I didn't have a band, and people would want me to join their bands and everything, and I'm like, okay, for this show or whatever. And I worked at a recording studio, so I played on sessions and stuff. So I just started to get the reputation as being a go-to bassist.
Cool.
Still, but I was in those bands that I was in. I was writing. I had taught myself how to play guitar by this point.
Okay.
And so I was already writing and arranging songs. So this was 30 years ago. Not early 90s.
Wow.
And starting to this was when it started to get more serious. Like, okay, we got to go in the studio. We got to record now. We got to release a demo tape. We got to have the promo pack. We got to go, you got to mail them in, or you got to hand deliver them, all this kind of crap. So I just started to learn how to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And because it was never really like, oh, that's too much work. It was like, oh, cool, this sounds like fun.
Yeah.
And then when I moved back to Kansas City.
Now, from San Diego,
yeah.
Are you moving back to Kansas? Or are you
moved
moving
to Kansas City
for the first time? Okay.
Yeah. And started going to KCAI and living in Midtown and going to shows and, seeing these bands and like, fuck, I want to do this again, right? So found some other guys to do some music and was in two bands while I was here. Must have been two bands. And switched from regular bass to fretless bass for one of them.
Oh, wow. I mean, is that the same thing as an upright? Or no?
Well, it's an electric bass, but it has no frets like an upright does. So you can get those slides and...
you didn't feel naked or...
No, I just saw it as a challenge.
Okay.
Because I liked so many... In fact, I think one of my albums that we're going to talk about had a fretless bassist in there. And I'm like, that's something I've always wanted to do.
Cool.
Saw that as a challenge, and it really took to it. I kind of missed the fact that I don't have one. But Then moved to Seattle. Had a band with my kid's mom. So we had this band, and it was kind of like a Mazzy Star kind of thing, because that was sort of popular at the time. So it was like acoustic, but also kind of gothy, and started to get around that time in Seattle. Grunge was done and was a dirty word. So there were a lot of other alternative kind of bands, and goth was really big up there too. And I'm like, I'm kind of getting back to my roots, and started doing that band more seriously. Like, we were really actually trying to get signed in that band.
Oh wow!
And
you're
made videos
in your early 20s.
Oh, I don't even remember how old I was, but this was late 90s.
Okay.
And then making friends with other bands in that scene. And then I had my first kid. And
born in Seattle.
Born in Tacoma.
Tacoma,
actually.
sorry, yeah.
No, but I was working in Seattle. And around that time, my kid's mom decided that she didn't want to do music anymore.
Okay.
Because she was a mom. I totally understand. But I still needed to do it. There was still something I still needed to follow it. So I started playing bass in my friend's band, which was kind of like a electronic goth band.
That sounds fun.
It was at times fun.
Okay.
when it was really good, it was great, and when it wasn't, it wasn't. And I'm sure part of that was my own fault. So I gotta, it's like I said, any relationship,
right?
You bring stuff in there. So, played with them for a while, then moved back to Kansas City.
And mom and kid come with, or no?
Yeah,
okay.
Everybody moved back because both of us still had family.
Okay.
And then, so I was, at that point, didn't know anybody in the area, because I was actually we first moved back to Lawrence, didn't know anybody. I was by myself a lot, really depressed because of the situation I was in. So I started just writing songs on my own, and I had already been doing that, writing some electronic songs and using drum machines and programs and trying to find this sort of sound I was looking for that was sort of Massive Attack, but maybe not so clinically electronic. Because by this point, especially in Seattle, electronic music was really popular too, and I really got into that.
So I assume by this point that you have a decent amount of gear in general.
Well, yeah, I was just basically just doing it on a computer.
Okay.
Just using computer-based software.
Okay.
And just working on my songcraft, and trying out a bunch of different stuff because I didn't have anything to lose. And again, I was in this place where music was my coping skill, and then a very fateful thing happened, and that is that I met a young lady named Julie Burnson.
Okay.
And Julie Burnson had grown up in Kansas, in Hutchinson. Okay. And moved to Chicago for school, and she had just moved back and had a job in Lawrence. And I guess maybe she had put an ad in the Craigslist looking for a band to sing for, a project.
This is 08-ish?
This would have been 09.
09, okay.
Yeah. And I sent her a message, and I said, hey, I like your influences, because she had said like Hooverphonic and Portishead and some of the electronic stuff that I liked but that stuff that was a little bit more jazzy. She had said she was a jazz singer, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so we met for coffee, and like we hit it off so greatly that we left the coffee shop, went back to my house, and recorded our first song together.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we had such a really great working relationship because she could take direction really well, and I was like, I don't really this is what I kind of want to hear, can you do it like this? And so I acted in more of like a producer mode, and so we ended up forming the band The Late Night Callers, which was I guess we were pretty successful in Kansas City. There hadn't been anything like us before.
Interesting.
And so we kind of took this idea that like, let's make some electronic music, but that also sounds like it may have come from the past.
Ooh.
So, and then like sing about some really dark stuff. like
What a
as if it
combo.
was cause the whole theme was like kind of noir based stuff. And so had found two other musicians. Nick Combs played keyboards.
I know that name from somewhere.
Well, he was in my band, the Late Night Callers.
Okay.
And then Gavin Mack,
Okay.
who is currently in a band called The Thick and the Foolish.
Okay.
Thick and the Foolish, who we played with over the weekend. He played bass, and he came from kind of a soul show band background, but also a rock background. So he was the perfect bass player.
Nice.
And Nick was really into wanting to do keyboard stuff, so that allowed me to figure out play the guitar. And that's when I found the baritone guitar.
Huh.
Found it by accident at Richard Music one day, because I was trading in a bunch of old guitars and old gear, and I saw this Gretsch on the wall, and I pulled it down thinking it was just a standard guitar, and I strummed a chord on it, and it was this giant, beautiful sound. And I'm like, what the fuck is this thing? And he's like, and I'll never forget, it was the guy named Austin who still works at Richard's Music. And
Is that on Mass?
It's on 8th Street.
8th, okay.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, that's a baritone guitar. And I'm like, what is this? And so we talked about it, and I instantly went home with it, and that became my sound forever.
Wow.
Ever since. Yeah,
Cool.
I still have that guitar.
Nice.
It's a little worse for the wear, but that was my main guitar through the Late Night Callers, which lasted from 2010 officially to like 2015.
Okay.
And we released a couple of CDs, never got on vinyl, like an official vinyl release, which is a total shame because those songs were great. And
are they not somewhere where they could still be? Or
probably.
Okay. You don't have...
No, I have them.
Oh.
But I hadn't thought about doing a... Fuck, I hadn't really thought about that. Maybe I should do that.
I mean, if you have the time and the resources, and it's a shamey thing.
Yeah.
I mean...
That actually would be a cool idea. Okay, I'm going to look into that.
Well, I mean... if it goes well, you're welcome. If it turns out to be a
I
nightmare,
would love to do it.
Not my fault.
I'm very proud of the work that band did, but it just got to the point where it had run its course. Too,
Sure.
Right.
But then Emmaline is right around the corner.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So what ended up happening then is, like, as soon as that was done, I was like, well, I'm not going to lose this momentum because
decades now.
Right. Well, and the success that the Callers had is like, well, and again, it was just like, well, I'm going to take what I learned from that and I'm going to put it into the next band. But I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I started two bands at the same time.
Hey.
This got me down the wrong road, meaning only because of the fact that now I mean multiple bands. But I wanted to, instead of try to put all my influences into one band, I wanted to concentrate on specific sounds in various bands. So I started Emmaline Twist to be specifically a post-punk shoegaze band.
Okay.
And then I started another band called Abandoned Bells, which I wanted it to be more dark Americana kind of sounding.
Interesting.
So to use the baritone guitar in that realm, and then to use the baritone guitar for post-punk stuff, because what I really wanted, what my goth teenage heart wanted, was to do something that sounded like The Cure and Sisters of Mercy and those types of bands that were playing this, darker driving rock and roll. But I also wanted to do spooky, weird Americana shit too.
And of that, who are a couple of influences?
That band was more influenced by stuff like 16 Horsepower and Slim Cessna's Auto Club and the offshoots. There was a whole Denver sound in the 90s and the early 2000s that was this dark Americana stuff.
Interesting.
And I really wanted to do that kind of stuff.
Okay. So you get both off the ground.
Right.
And eventually they spawn into other... Or...
Well, what ended up happening is that both bands had their level of success.
Oh, cool.
And
good problem to have.
Yeah, it actually was a good problem to have until it just got to the point where my own personal life was getting in the way, and I needed to be able to just concentrate on one thing.
Okay.
And
I mean, good on you for having the foresight to recognize that, right?
Yeah, and it sucked because when you leave a band, especially one that it was being successful like that was, it's it's not fun. You're breaking up with somebody who thinks that, hey, why are we breaking up?
Yeah.
And I loved those two people. It was Terry Quinn, and who's, also extremely successful in town doing her own version of that, right? She's still doing this kind of witchy Americana stuff.
Cool.
And then Tyson Schroeder played drums, and he was just such an incredibly unique talent on the drums. And that band had something really magical that would happen when we would get on stage. Is very, and I use magical in the true sense of the word. Something ritualistic happened with that band that just loved getting into that space with them. Emmaline Twist was recording, creating music faster, starting to ramp up quicker because there's more opportunities for a rock band, and it got to the point where we were concentrating on getting a record out and doing more stuff. So I just wanted to focus on that some more, and personal stuff. I just wanted to not have so much on my plate. And
man, it's funny. You walk through life, especially in our youth, with some sense of indestructibility.
Yeah.
And I know my fucking parents and all these adults are such buzzkills because I got it figured out. And then you're like 40 before you even realize the concept of plate and fullness.
That's exactly
and
right.
And then it's another however long for you. You know what? I'd rather give more to these other things.
Right.
And
yeah.
I mean, it's anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so Emmaline Twist is going strong, looking great. Then the pandemic happens, which is probably a theme that many of these people spoke about, you as well. And suddenly everything just stopped. And so to keep my own sanity, because I'm at home by myself, I just recorded a bunch more songs. I recorded a bunch of songs, or demos, right? They're not actual songs. They're just demos of some stuff could be Emmaline Twist songs. And then I started thinking, I had some songs that weren't really fitting with Emmaline Twist, and I'm like, well, what can I do with these? These are all good songs. Some were holdovers from Late Night Callers. Some were stuff that just never saw the light of day in any band, but they were more experimental in the sense that they didn't really fit into a particular genre. And around that same time, local musician and friend of mine, D.A.R.E Moore, who runs the band at the time, they were called Monta at Odds, had asked me to play on one of their tracks, play baritone guitar.
That's
on
fun.
Backs. Yeah,
featuring.
Exactly. So I think I did that. I can't remember if it was right before the pandemic or right after the pandemic. It may have been right after, but anyhow, he and I started developing a rapport and finding that we liked the same kind of stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get these songs worked up. Nobody in my band has computer software to work on any of these things. Do you want to take a shot at do you want to put some synthesizers on some of these songs? And through basically the course of the pandemic, he and I were working on these songs together, and he was sending me more Monta songs.
Monta.
It was originally called Monta at Odds, and now they go by Monta.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And so pretty much by the end of the pandemic, what had happened is I pretty much became a member of Monta to do these songs and to be a musical collaborator with D.A.R.E. And then we started another project called Static Phantoms, which is basically we just turned those other songs that we were working on together into a synth pop project, because it wasn't a guitar-driven rock band like Emmaline Twist, and it wasn't a synth-driven dance band like Monta. It was someplace in the middle there. And it was also the first time where I gave myself the permission to be the vocalist.
Oh,
so
first time.
Exactly. So I started singing that, and I'm still working on it. It's something that doesn't come naturally, but I always hearken back to the story of how Donald Fagen started singing for Steely Dan, he had written all these songs, and they had tried out all these vocalists, but nobody had the right attitude for him. So he just became the singer.
I'll do it.
Yeah, and he's got a very unconventional voice. So if he can do it, I can.
Are you a football fan at all?
I follow the Chiefs.
Okay. You know who Tony Romo and Jim Nantz are? They're a television broadcast duo. Mm-hmm. And Romo is not too terribly long ago, he was the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
And then all of a sudden, he's literally blowing minds because he's calling plays before they happen because he could just by looking at formations.
Oh yeah.
And it was, I think he's really great. But and then when he gets eventually, maybe always was paired with Jim Nantz. They're really good together.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote a piece on them, so that meant that I don't know if they spent the weekend with them or just a whole Sunday. But the piece kind of starts off in this drive-through, and maybe they're getting coffee, and Romo talks about this sort of 5-hour warming up of his voice to call a 3-hour broadcast.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have like a real. It's sort of like he came out of the womb a little hoarse, or maybe screaming as a quarterback,
sure.
as a signal caller, did some.
Yeah.
But to talk about football for 3 hours is basically spending 5 hours getting his voice ready.
Sure.
And there's across these a lot of conversations about all the way to the super, super heavy, throaty stuff and all the things you really got to do. You start looking up bands that have had vocalists that have done that, and inevitably it's like booked an 18-month tour and 3 months in, canceled because they didn't do it right.
Absolutely.
And so it's a freaking fragile...
It truly is.
In my imagination, delicate thing that if you don't nurture and take, so of course you're still learning. Like,
yep. But it's fun, right? And so that brings us to here.
Okay.
That's where we're
at.
No, there's two more things.
Go for it.
One of them is that I do improvised ambient music with various other musicians in town, in which we just get together and create weird sounds.
Okay.
And not weird as in unlistenable.
Sure.
Just like it's just unscripted ambient music. So we like to call it's like jazz music, but really quiet and spacey.
That sounds fun.
It is a lot of fun, and I'm lucky to have some great collaborators in that regard. And then I also play in Cure cover band.
Oh,
and
really?
We practice. We play like once a year now.
Okay.
But it's just with
That's
some
cool.
other local musicians. It's a blast.
Nice.
It's just a fun thing we do at the end of the year to
sure
have a ball.
You said something happened when the bass got put in your hands, and I immediately are you a South Park guy?
No. I kind of missed the boat on South Park because it just over the years it was either during the time I was raising a family or going through my divorce.
Right.
And
well, they have a black kid on there whose name is Token. And at one point they decided to form a band, and you know who Cartman is.
Yeah.
He's barking orders at people, and you're going to play the drums, and I'm going to be blah, 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 and Token, you're going to play the bass. And he's like, I don't know how to play the bass. And he's like, God damn it, Token, you're going to play the bass. And he's like, I don't know how to play the bass. And he puts a bass in his hands, and he goes, play a bass line. He's like, I'm telling you, I don't know how. And he's like, Token, God, and all of a sudden he just busts this super fat riff out, and Token himself goes, God damn it. So of the things that we talked about, Aspera, drugs, dissimulation, and Vega, and Moon Eyes, all those were recorded in one spot or various spots?
No, we did the first single, Vega and Moon Eyes, at Temple Sounds, which used to be down across the street from where the record bar is now.
Okay.
And that was
I
actually,
saw that on the Bandcamp, and the
yeah.
person's name is very familiar to me.
Lynn Buck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I know that
He
name?
plays in some bands.
Okay.
And really cool studio space. It's basically just one big room, and the control board's set in there. It's a really organic vibe in there. And we just recorded those 2 songs.
Okay.
And then everything else we've done with Paul Malinowski over at Massive Sound.
Okay. That name's like every episode is coming up more and more.
Well, there's your Shiner T-shirt. Right there.
Yeah.
So,
yes. That's right.
He's the king, and he really knows how to get our sound.
Okay.
And so he used to run sound for us when we played at Record Bar and stuff, and him being a bass player too. Really understands how we want to get that sound.
Cool.
And so we've got 6 more songs recorded.
Hey.
That we just need 2 more songs.
What is it about 8?
If it were up to me,
Dissimulation is 8 tracks.
Dissimulation is 8. If it were up to me, I would release the 6 songs on a record, because I grew up listening to EPs. Like every band I listened to put out EPs, and they would do that because there were times where you didn't have enough songs to release on a record, but your public wanted it, and
there are also times when those just really, really work.
They do.
I.e. Sap and Jar of Flies for me.
Sure.
Are the 2 that always come to mind first.
Right.
Like it's like this, oh man, I wish there was more, but also that was really nice the way it was.
Exactly. I like this notion of it being a smaller collection.
Sure.
Right? And pretty, like I had mentioned, pretty much in my entire album collection from the 80s, there's every one of those bands has EPs.
Yeah.
And I think that really just part of it is also a cost measure, because when you're releasing, especially vinyl, when you're releasing vinyl, it costs a lot of fucking money, and it costs a lot of money to get it pressed. It
costs a lot of money to buy it, too,
exactly.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yep, it does. So I think that we basically just got to a point where we're like, well, it's going to cost the same amount of money for this object. We might as well just put them all together and save ourselves some money to do that, so that it could all just be released at once. Problem is, it's been 5 years since we've released a record, and we really just need to get we just need to get it done.
Who's calling it a problem?
Who's calling it a problem? Yeah. I'm calling it a problem.
Okay. Are you alone in that?
No, you know what? I'm not trying to make it sound like it's me against the rest of my band. That's not a case.
That wasn't.
Yep. No. It's that it is that. It's not that it's a problem. It's that our fans want more, right? So you're like, we've got these songs that we've been playing live for years, but nobody can hear them because there may be a couple of digital recordings, but people like music because they like music, and we don't even have any more vinyl records of Dissimulation. We got like 10 copies left.
And you can't run another.
Well, we could, but it's the same amount of money as it would be to release a new record. So we're just not going to do that. So it's really just a matter of.
But it will always be available digitally.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe one of these days we'll do a pressing. So it's just there's just a lot of logistics involved in it.
Of course.
We've got songs in the hopper that we would like to record and haven't done it yet. But the pure fact of the matter is that there are 5 adults in the band who have other shit in their lives going on than just concentrating on music.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's just going to happen when it happens.
That's
right?
the best way, I think. But
Right.
so I was a little bit serious and a little bit tongue in cheek by saying it's being called a problem by who? I mean, it is a way to get, I'm really only going to see shows of bands whose stuff I've listened to ahead of time.
Yeah.
So it's a way to give that to your people to perhaps grow your fan base.
Yeah.
It's also, sort of, if you think of your token television drama where there's a patient in the hospital and the the screen, the EKG, or beep. Like putting something out is like the pulse. It's still alive.
Yep.
But also, the fellas that were over on Saturday, we talked a little bit about Tool. Mm-hmm. 5 records from 92 to 20 something, and I think for sure once, if not twice, 10 years in between.
Right.
And it's like you could barely even measure the leaps and bounds that their fandom has grown across that. And they're just like, it is what it is, man.
Exactly.
And they're also, while that, they're also like really private, it's like, we'll put stuff out for you to buy and listen to, and we'll book gigs for you to buy tickets and come, but that's all you get.
Yeah.
And you're going to get 100% of it on our timeline,
Exactly. No, and that's absolutely respectable, and we certainly wouldn't want to just rush out a bunch of half-assed, half-formed songs,
sure.
right? And one of the reasons that we have released the 2 singles, and we're actually about ready to release another single here in October.
Nice.
Just to keep that heartweat going, right?
Yeah.
Because we do want to still have some relevance.
Yeah.
And we've been really successful with those digital singles too. I mean, they've made the top lists of the year every year.
Wow.
Because, the songs are good. So it's great. I'm just looking forward to the day that we've got a second record.
Sure.
Because I think it's going to fulfill this second leg of the band's journey.
Okay.
And then we'll see what happens after that.
So you practice weekly. If you have a gig, you work twice as hard. So there's no, you get the week off. Yeah. You've kind of across all of these years been writing stuff. I got to believe you have a vault of stuff that has maybe some stuff you've never shared with bandmates, or some stuff that you did share and it never went anywhere.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of that stuff lying around too.
And so are you? And I'm just logistically curious. Are you the primary songwriter for Emmaline, or is it coming from different?
Yeah, I've written all those songs.
Okay.
But when I say written, that means I come to the band with a demo. And then at that point, it then turns into something else.
Right.
Because what the other band members contribute is how do we want to make this sound like it's not just a demo, right? Can we put another part here? Can we do something different with the intro? And that's when the rest of the band really shines as contributors, because the starting point is, okay, here's the song, here's the chords, here's some lyrics, and we try to work it out. And sometimes, a few times this has happened, we've tried out a song and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, don't
so,
force it.
Yeah, a couple of those songs have become Static Phantom songs. A couple of the songs just nothing ever happened with them beyond that. Or I'll chop them up and do something different with parts of it that are cool.
Yeah.
So nothing's ever completely gone. And but what I love about working with everybody in Emmaline Twist is that the sound of that band has to be those 5 people.
Of course.
It has to be.
Of course.
And so they're going to bring not only their flair for the performance, but they're going to take anything I've written and make it like 18 times better, because I'm really just putting the most minimal stuff together to get the outline of the song together.
Right.
And
showing them the bones,
right,
and
exactly.
the organs and flesh and personality.
Precisely. It doesn't become a song until we as a band make it.
But
that way.
We just need 2 more. I mean, so do they know that's how you feel?
Oh yeah, I mean we talk about this all the time.
Okay.
We all know that we need some more music, but it really just comes down to we haven't had the time.
Okay.
Right? With everybody's. With the life that everybody has.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I really tend more often than not to find value in that. It'll happen when it happens.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes a wait is so long and frustrating, but it always, when it's done, you're like, I like how that ended up unfolding.
I think that the challenge for me is that I love what we do so much that I just want more from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I want to hear what more we can do, and I want
Sure.
other people to hear more what we can do. Right? Music is the sharing of an experience.
Right.
Right. It's not a passive thing. Like you
No.
buy a piece of art or you go to a museum, you're watching passivity. Right. Something has been made concrete, and that's the only way it is. But with music, every time we play a song, whether it's at practice or at a show or on recording, it's a little bit different. And then that becomes that version of it.
Right.
And it'll never be exactly like that again.
Right.
And the beauty of music is to revisit that.
Yeah.
Like, let's bring that feeling back. Let's do that thing again. I
Nice.
love playing that song. Oh, these fans like that stuff. Oh, this audience is going to be into this particular thing, right? It's setting up a happening in time that you know, I hate to use this word again because it sounds trite, but there's magic that happens in that.
Yeah.
And there's a timeless quality, and it's something that have always been addicted to from a very young age, like as we've been talking about this musical journey. And there's nothing wrong with wanting more.
No.
But you also can't force things.
Nope.
Right? So there are songs that any number of the bands or musical projects that I have could be working on at any amount of time. But it's just a matter of like, everything has to be in the right place for us to be able to make that happen.
Right.
So
you have a spot for where you guys have a regular time and day that you practice.
Mm-hmm.
You have a spot where you go to record stuff. You're connected with venues around town and other bands. I mean, so like all the things that need to be plugged in are right.
Yeah.
It's sort of, churning along and
That's
and
right.
Good.
Yeah.
So let's see here. I keep thinking that I'll get to the point where when somebody sends me a list, it won't blow my mind. Because it's hard. It's hard not to see tendencies or eras.
Right.
Or if something's all over, that kind of stands out too. Even the amount of time it takes people to turn, to give me one. Yeah. I've said this a bunch of times. It's like some people got to deliberate for just a second. Some people got to deliberate for a long time, and some people it's like they were waiting to be asked, and they're like, "Here," So thank you for sending me your list.
Cool.
And it might be the most confined to an era.
I'm sure
that I've seen, and looking at it on paper, it's like, I mean, was this forced? Did he, is he trying to say something? But now that I've heard your story, it makes perfect sense, considering where you started, the places you've been, the musician, the experiences that you've had as a musician. And it's just super cool.
Cool.
So I always like to run through it in order of release.
Cool.
And yours, this has happened once or twice where somebody has more than one record that came out in the same year.
Yeah.
And each time that has happened, I'm like, ooh, and then then I got to go look at month and date, and they're always like within just a handful of weeks of each other.
Yep.
Which turned out to be true here.
Before we do that, can I use a washroom?
Do it.
Thank you so much. Okay. I appreciate your questioning and the research you've done and everything. So this is a lot of fun.
Well, good.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so We're starting off in 1980 with Ultravox's Vienna,
yes.
Which is the fourth of 11 that they put out, 9 tracks, 43 minutes.
Yes. Oh, wow.
I realized that I'm not sure if I have the right version because it appears that there's a European and then a North American.
Yes.
The one I picked leads off with Astrodyne.
Yep.
Which was wicked cool and an unexpected journey. Ballsy. It's like a 7 minute,
it's long, instrumental.
For a 1980 lead-off track. Really bold move. So how did you discover these guys, and what is the rest of their discography like?
Oh my gosh. So Midge Ure is one of my all-time musical heroes. So he was the singer in this version of Ultravox. Ultravox had 2 versions. Actually, they had 3 versions, but this is what everybody considers their classic lineup.
Okay.
So he joined the band in 79, but before that, he had been in a number of musical projects. He's Scottish, and he had been in a band called Slick, S-L-I-K, as a teenager, and they were basically like a Bay City Rollers also ran kind of band, also from Scotland.
Huh.
And then he was in a band with Glenn Matlock from the Sex Pistols.
Okay.
So when Glenn Matlock left the Sex Pistols and Sid Vicious took over that spot, he started a band called the Rich Kids.
Huh.
And Midge Ure was the singer in that band.
Oh, wow.
And I can't even remember how many records they did, maybe 1. And then, weirdly enough, and this is one of my favorite rock and roll stories, that Midge Ure played guitar for Thin Lizzy on a tour. Because he was friends with Phil Lynott.
Okay.
And so subbed in with Thin Lizzy. Then he was in a band, an electronic band, doing musical production with called Visage. Now, in Visage...
Is that Visage?
Visage.
Okay.
And Visage was basically a musical project that brought together a very flamboyant vocalist who was part of that same scene that like Boy George and the New Romantics came up in the late 70s. And so Midge Ure wrote all the music for that project, and it included members of the band Magazine, who one of those members was the guitar player John McGough, who went on to play with Susie and the Banshees. Barry Adamson, who was the bass player for Magazine as well, went on to play with Nick Cave.
Okay.
And have a solo career with himself. Rusty Egan was a very famous DJ in that scene during that time,
and good friends with Dusty Street.
he may have been. And then so during that time, there was also another guy in the band who was Billy Currie, who was the keyboard player for Ultravox, and Billy Currie had also gone on tour with Gary Newman.
Oh,
so so during this weird lull between the 2 versions of Ultravox, Billy Currie went off on tour with Gary Newman. At the
Gary
same time,
Newman had an outfit called.
Well, so he was the band was originally called Two Boy Army.
Yes.
And then he was just Gary Newman.
But he put out that band's debut and his solo debut in the same year.
That's right.
So for all of this multi-project musician stuff
right?
that is your life.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. This is what these guys were doing.
Wow.
And they've even admitted, they're like, well, what else were we supposed to do,
right?
And
our parents don't want us to do drugs, man.
Right. Well, I'm sure there was plenty of drugs.
Right.
They were adults at the time. So anyhow, coming off of the heels of that Visage project, Billy Currie had asked Midge Ure, hey...
Which, M-I-D-G-E?
M-I-D-G-E, yes.
And then his last name is...
Ure, U-R-E.
Interesting.
It's very... So it's not his real name. His real name is James.
Okay.
But Jim, Midge, it's sort of like a reverse spelling of his name.
Gotcha.
So, anyhow, Billy Currie said, "Hey, we need a new singer. We want to keep going on with the band."
Right.
Because their prior singer had gone off to do a solo record. They basically took all the influence of these electronic things that they were doing with Visage, created this album, Vienna by Ultravox, and of course it was a massive hit because of the song Vienna.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
But so the rest of their stuff are you familiar with it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you enjoy it all as much as this one? Or why does this one get a spot on your list?
This one gets the spot because it was the first one.
Okay, fair enough.
And there's also something that still is a little bit more synth pop and electronic about this record versus some of their later stuff, which became a little bit more, especially in the later mid 80s, became a little bit more over polished and poppy. Right.
Yeah.
And while the records were still good, the production value just wasn't the same.
Okay.
And it was probably the third incarnation of the band was like 86 or 87, and they had lost a couple of members. They just couldn't really find their way at that point. But this record is just so classic, and the three records or the two or three records that came after it were just they were all great.
Nice.
But this was the beginning of it. And the aesthetic of it, the artwork, it was just the entire package.
Sure.
Everything about it. You watch live concert footage of them at this time, it's just like, this band is so cool.
Yeah. And well, that notion of whenever it was, when it's all over polished and it's interesting that you say that the records are just as good. It's just that the production is not.
Yeah.
But that over polished whatever that is, as if you've never dived into this genre or these, that's what I associate, new wave, new whatever.
Yeah.
All of it is just it's stamp like and here's our new record.
Right.
So to check out some of these records, it's like, oh, okay, now this is more like the roots of the movement or the movements, and I'm sure that you're correct in saying that the records were just as good, but it's almost like the integrity is a little more palpable than whatever sampling I had gotten along the way, if that makes any sense.
It does. I think that when I think that it's easy to look at a genre of music from its most commercial and probably worst part of it, because that was the part that was the most exposed.
Right.
So, just like when people think about 70s music, they think disco, right? Or 60s and they think hippie music,
right?
Right? Or they think 50s and they think Elvis, greaser rock, right? And certainly there was a lot more stuff going on, but when a movement is in its nascent period, and these
great word,
these groups are trying to figure it out,
right?
That's where the magic really is,
right?
And as soon as it starts to become a commodity, and when I say this, I mean, like, to me, the death year of all this music that we're talking about was about 85, 86, because now it was like some of these bands had become like world famous,
right?
And the production value had become slicker and more polished and more commercialized. And, even as a teenager, you're like, oh, I don't like them anymore. They sold out, right? And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that they're not taking risks anymore. They're not,
right.
They're
or maybe they're not allowed to.
Well, remember we talked about earlier, as soon as somebody else's money's involved, right? That's what happens.
Yeah.
Right? Suddenly it is not your product anymore. You are part of a larger brand offering.
Brand offering. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you're on Warner Brothers, well, you're going to play by Warner Brothers rules, or you're going to play by Geffen's rules, or everything. And so the bands that have succeeded over time, if we want to use an example from that particular time, we can use U2, right? They started out young, scrappy, nobody knew what to make of them.
Boy War, October.
Right. Yeah, sort of post-punk, sort of new wave, sort of rock and roll. What the hell are they? they were kind of just left to gestate. And then when they finally got to the point of Joshua Tree, it changed everything, right? The world changed to meet what they put out. It was the opposite way that normally it goes,
yeah,
right? And so, but now these days, you could argue that U2's no better than any other sellout band. I still am very much a fan of Joshua Tree and earlier U2 stuff.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
My group of buddies, in high school, we're still buddies, but we did our running around together in high school, and some of them continued in college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really the artist where I felt like I was deviating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like everything that they put out, these guys just couldn't get enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like with each record that followed Joshua Tree,
mm-hmm.
I was a little more like, I don't know. And it's like, no, they're reinventing. And I was like, but what the thing that they're reinventing just isn't for me.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not a scholar.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do know the earlier stuff up to Joshua Tree pretty well. And then the first two albums after I know pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't like willfully reject. I just
Right.
was going somewhere else. But I tried to fight that, like this rejoicing of, and they were, I think both sides were equally confused.
Yeah.
Like, I was like,
right.
I don't understand why. And
What?
they're like, there's something wrong with you. It's like, I guess maybe there is. I don't know. But
No, I
I'm
don't
glad
think
you
that
mentioned
was.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, I said up to Joshua Tree, but I really love Octung Baby.
Okay, yes, that's somebody that has made
Yep.
somebody's list, and it was a joy to revisit that.
Oh yeah.
I think it's the one right after that where I was like,
Yeah.
nope,
Yep.
sorry.
I jumped ship after that. But yeah, the Ultravox, they did this thing where because Midge was a rock guitarist, and they mixed that rock guitar with this very sterile or very sterile electronic sound that is just bridged. They were one of the first bands to really do that.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's why that was kind of a thing. So when you look at what New Wave was trying to do, and the more successful New Wave, it was like, if they were going to get on the radio, they had to have some rock guitar. So find that thing. but even up through the 80s, the more successful the bands that became more successful through the 80s still had rock guitar in them. INXS, U2,
Yeah.
right? Those types of bands that were, that had that combination of stuff. But this record, they recently did a 40th anniversary release of this, and it had all these songs. These bonus tracks were actually the B-sides on certain EPs and singles. But the anniversary issue also comes with a live album.
Oh, cool.
And it's just like, what's astounding is you think, oh, well, somebody's just programming all those keyboards in the studios. Nobody's really playing those things. But you hear the live record, and it's just like, they're ripping that up.
The next point I was going to make was to touch on what you said a second ago. It's always easy to look at the most commercialized. And so that point, in addition to the one that you just made, goes back to that, that stamp. All of this sounds, I don't know what it sounds like, but part of what not knowing what it sounds like is like it's almost like, is this cheating? Like, because like the love for a studio album is that whole thing to me, even to the point where now somebody else's money is involved, but it's like artist A comes to the group of musicians with a collection of songs, or maybe it's a collective kind of thing, and then flesh them out. You make them the bands, right? And then, okay, now we're ready to record. And maybe, especially, I don't know about now, but I mean, in the 70s, you would, this huge chunk of time that's probably being bought with somebody else's money, but we all got to show up and do the thing and put in all the, and okay, here's the end product and cover art and track listing and what's there's probably some broken hearts because track X didn't make it and this member totally wanted, but here's the final product at the end of the day, and it was this whole, all of these people and engineers and then you listen to some of this stuff in that easiest to access, most commercial, and it's like I don't, is any of that in there, or is it just a dude with a, you know what I'm saying? But
exactly,
this is sort of the man behind the curtain. You say, oh yeah, man, this is these are legitimate folks with years of studying and learning and teaching, and it's cool. It's really cool stuff. We leap 2 years forward. New Gold Dream by Simple Minds. 20 records, these guys. Including one from last year, I believe. They are,
you know, their most recent record is great.
Okay.
And so Diedrich Moore, who is my partner in Manta and in Static Phantoms, he's the only other person I know that is as big of a Simple Minds fan as I am.
That's funny.
And he actually, he turned me on to their more recent stuff, and they decided to do that thing too, where it's just like, look, we had our commercial success and ebbs and flows, but this is what we love to do. We're going to keep doing it. And so they actually reimagined the band a couple of times.
Bold.
Yeah, and the band that they have right now plays these old songs. They'll go out on tour and feature a particular album from their past, or they'll do, you know, a whole bunch of new songs, and they still sound vital.
Wow.
And it's to what you were just describing there. They found people that they weren't hiring as studio musicians. They were hiring as band members who were going to contribute to their sound.
Cool.
And so that's
Big
just
difference.
what they do.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, this is one of those bands that you still will see them play festivals or going on tour, and they're just as vital as they have ever been.
Because you know, again, unfortunately, at least in my case, and again, another reason, you know, like for doing this, if you want to add a fourth leg to the stool, is like at some point, I acquired, unfortunately, a large layer of music snobbery, and it was like,
sure,
this is the start of the line for good taste.
Yeah.
If you want to learn, and
we've all been there.
I don't know. It was like I'm on a unicycle juggling bowling pins, and it just forever until it's like, Jesus, dude, like that's not so. Right. Like I want to know what you're into, and
exactly.
So, if I was handed a handbill for a festival that had Simple Minds on it, that old snobby knee-jerk, these fucking guys are just trying to make a buck, but nope, they put out 20 freaking records.
Exactly. They just kept it going.
U2 allegedly considered this album an influence when they were recording Unforgettable Fire.
Did. That's true.
Which somebody else had on their list and was also an absolute treat to revisit.
Yeah.
I think I always sometimes I'll put on the older stuff, but if I get that U2 itch, I'll go right to Joshua Tree.
Oh yeah.
And most of the time it scratches it. Oh yeah. And sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
I was not able to determine. This one has 9 tracks, runs 46 minutes. What's the 8-1, 8-2, 8-3, 8-4 thing all about?
So there's it's kind of the chorus of that song.
Oh.
So
I missed that.
Yeah. So the song's called New Gold Dream, which is the first lyric in the song.
Okay.
And then the chorus is sort of a chant, and they sing those numbers 81, 82, 83, 84.
Oh.
And
okay.
so that's
I saw it in one way it was hyphenated, and then another way it had dashes, and then one place listed it with as a parenthetical to the album title, and then over here it was just the track.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, what is this, like some secret language?
Yeah, it's really just it's like any song that they have to like say, oh, you might know it because they sing this part.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is 3 years before most of the rest of the world would discover them via the Breakfast Club.
Right.
Don't you forget about me. And
yep.
So like when that came out from that soundtrack, you already knew these guys.
Oh yeah. In fact,
that's bananas.
That for the diehard Simple Minds fans, that was the end of the road.
No.
Yes, because it was like, oh, they've sold out now. They're doing this.
Sure.
Right? And it wasn't that that's a bad song. It's got all the ingredients, and it's actually still the classic lineup of that band.
Okay.
But after that, their bass player left, and their bass player at that point in time was this guy named Derek Forbes, who was, to me as a bass player at the time, was such a huge influence.
Oh, wow.
Because he was just such a great bass player, and these songs are really bass driven. And it's similar textures to this Ultravox stuff, but there was something a little bit more. Oh, I don't even know what the word is. I don't know really how to explain it, but all the same qualities are in there. But the secret weapon on this record was the guitarist, and his name is Charlie Burchill. And he was doing, you had mentioned the U2 thing. He was doing that delayed guitar thing before the Edge was doing it.
Okay.
And he was also,
U2 fans, cover your ears.
Right. And so that was a big influence. Like he was doing that, but he also was doing his guitar textures in a way that was underneath all the other layers. Ooh. Normally a guitar is like way up front. Forward, yeah. Right? But he played guitar in a way that sounded like, is that a synthesizer? What the hell's going on there? And so just this album was the perfect combination of time of a band being together, experience of a band being together, what was going on in the music scene during that period. It's just beautiful and spacious and huge, and to me it will always be their best record.
So for diehard Simple Minds fans, that track from that soundtrack was the end of the road.
Well,
you
that
say
was a bit drastic.
You say that all the records up until even the one from last year are just as vital.
They are,
and they've reinvented. So which one is it, or where do you fit in?
Well, so I actually have the same relationship with this band that I do with Depeche Mode, which is I really loved everything they did up to a certain point. Okay. And then I just kind of like stopped caring for a while. And then the most recent Depeche Mode record is the most Depeche Mode record they've released since Violator, in my opinion.
And they just toured in support of it, right?
That's right.
And folks were pretty jazzed about it.
Okay. Yeah. And so Simple Minds just kind of fell off my radar because they're not being kind of commercially pushed anymore, right? So I'm like, whatever. I'm fine with listening to the old stuff. But then coming back and rediscovering their work over the past decade, I'm like, oh, I missed out on a lot because this is really good.
At least you're here now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So part of it is the music snobbery of a teenager, like you're saying, is like, I'm done.
I know, but at 20 and 30, I'm still carrying it's like an old shirt that I can't.
Exactly. You know, there's some stuff that just does that. So anyhow, as a guitarist, this record meant a lot to me too because of the fact that the textures that he's doing really influence a lot of my playing right now.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. It almost, the texturing of that guitar playing, it's almost like I can see a line to the baritone where you strummed it.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, that's my forever sound.
That's exactly it. There's a few bands, and I didn't include, actually I don't know what else is on the list. There's a band called the Chameleons that was also doing the delayed guitar. And as corny as their legacy is, those first 2 Flock of Seagulls records also employed that same kind of guitar thing, and I just love that stuff.
Nice.
Love it.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So let's see here. I mean, I just, again, hats off to them for I know different folks and different iterations, but 20 records is, no one can,
that's right.
Say it's just,
they're not resting on their laurels, that's for sure.
Hitting double digits is phenomenal.
Yeah.
If you put out 10 records, fucking standing O.
Yeah.
20?
Yeah, it's impressive.
Bro. So then we moved to 84, where we've got the 2 that were kind of released within a handful of weeks. And April 6th of 84, we get Pop, Tones on Tail.
Yes.
And I love that their discography sort of mirrors something we were talking about just a little bit ago, because this is it for them.
Yeah.
It's their only LP. However, 3 EPs, half a dozen singles, and a few compilation albums.
Right.
But this one is their lone studio, 9 tracks, 39 minutes, short and sweet. How did they land in your lap?
Oh, this band almost brings me to tears.
Oh,
when I think
man.
about it. And it's so weird because it's one of, there were a few bands that I really grasped onto during that formative time of playing my bass in my bedroom as a teenager. And the very first song I ever heard from them, and it is on this record. Oh no, it's not on this record.
Oh no, that's okay.
It's on one of their EPs.
Okay,
it's a song called,
even more fitting.
Yeah, it's a song called Twist.
Okay.
Ironically, right? Or coincidentally, and it came out of the stereo in such a haunting manner that and it was so completely different than anything else that was being played on there that I'm like, what is this band? And then I found out that it was this side project of 2 of the members of Bauhaus.
Yeah.
Daniel Ash and Kevin Haskins.
Yeah. Who would later form
Love and Rockets.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I had already been a Bauhaus fan, but this didn't sound like Bauhaus. This sounded like some kind of, and Daniel Ash used the term mutant pop music, because he was basically just trying to do something so bizarre that like kind of like threw everything but the kitchen sink into these odd little pop songs. And so he would take a 50s guitar and match it with a weird spooky watery chorusy fretless bass, and the drums being played like a little drum machine, that it was taking odd spooky instruments and putting them together and making these strange little songs.
I gotta tell you, man, Lions as the opener, very alluring.
Yep.
I was like, shit, dude, I am fucking in. And it was a fun little journey. And then they departed from that. And I expected to be disappointed and to check out, but each subsequent track was like more different than the one that preceded it. And I was like, I don't not like this.
Right.
So I'm like I'm kind of like kicking rocks, but sticking around and like, this is fucking fascinating, man.
And that's exactly right. It's like, it was almost like, because of the fact that he was trying to do something so different. And this actually is going to be a nice segue into what I think is the next one on the list, is that you've got these people who have the weight of their prior band on their shoulders.
Fuck.
Right?
Ayahuasca, come on.
Yeah. And so when they get to this place where they're like, I'm going to do everything the complete opposite of how I've done it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cleanse it, purify it.
Right.
Fresh start.
And it challenges them as musicians and us as listeners to recontextualize what our relationship is with them. And so suddenly, when I'm not listening to goth music like Bauhaus, which was very glam rock and punk rock put together. That's what Bauhaus was.
And sort of goth soundtrack, or
exactly,
outfit or costume.
Exactly, yeah. So it was very, very much the trappings of everything that was supposed to be goth. Now, when Daniel Ash said, well, instead of black, we're going to wear white. And instead of playing big, loud, distorted guitars, we're going to play weird 50s sounding guitars. And so he just finding some other ways to express, but to get to the same goal, which is making something weird and different and dark and spooky.
It's like if you are a third grade teacher for 15 years, and every single year, the family of every student in your classroom adores you. Your kids they're going to remember you forever.
Yeah.
And after 15 years, they're like, now go do it to juniors in high school. And it's not going to be 20. It's going to be 90s or whatever. And you have to bring the enthusiasm and the energy and the preparedness every day. And you need every mind and body in that room dialed in. And, and it's a lot of weight to, move into that new realm, I would think.
Yeah. And you have to completely... There's two things that are going on there. You have to really trust that what your vision is correct and follow that and have that confidence. But then to also, I honestly believe that Daniel Ash did not give a shit that if anything happened with this band.
Okay. Well, there's some value in that.
Absolutely. But what's funny is, and you mentioned Love and Rockets, that first Love and Rockets album was essentially the second Tones on Tail record, because those songs and the way that they're constructed and produced and everything was the logical extension of what he did on this record, this Tones on Tail album. And so any of those songs could have been Tones on Tail songs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild.
And it just got better because David J was able to contribute a lot more to it to make it Love and Rockets. But it's in essence the same blueprint. It's like, what are we going to do that's not Bauhaus, but it's still cool and dark and weird and lets us grow.
Nice. So April 6th and then May 4th, The Top, The Cure.
Yep.
Were you right?
Yep.
Okay. 5th to 13, 10 tracks, 40 minutes. This band... so I've had in addition to this snobbery, I've had a number of occasions, in the last 20 years or whatever. I mean, probably across my whole music listening life, where there's a loud voice in support of band X. And then eventually enough people sit and you're like, all right, I gotta, and a lot of times I sit down with those bands and I'm like, this shit just not for me, man.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily label it.
Yeah.
But I'm going this way now.
Sure.
And then circle back years later, I'm like, shit, that's really good.
Yeah.
And so when I started this, it felt like I just couldn't get away from Wilco Records.
Yeah.
And that's a band that I had done that for.
Yeah.
I've since learned that, I'm not sure they've ever put out two albums that weren't just, complete spectrums apart. I mean,
absolutely.
Every time I'm like, geez, man, they've really got a big bag of tricks.
Yeah.
And The Cure is another one. I mean, they're yours, Land's. So there are three others have been featured, and they are, so there's yours, and then there's another one, and then it's Bam Bam Bam, and Kiss Me Kiss Me Kiss Me, Disintegration.
Yeah, so it's The Top, and then Head on the Door.
Yep.
Kiss Me Kiss Me Kiss Me, Disintegration.
And then the one after that.
The one after that is Wish.
So those three have all made, anyway, Cure and Wilco.
Yeah.
Two bands that I had in a previous moment in my life being like, you guys can keep that. Yeah. They're like the most appeared artist, which I really, really had a pigeonholed Cure as X.
Yeah.
And not for me.
I get it.
And I listened to one of those that was first, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And then the next one, I was like, it's pretty good, and not like And then the third one, you can almost see the maturation.
Yeah.
Not that this first one was anyway. So
Right.
and I'm like, well, okay, that's a little bit out of left field.
Yeah.
It's not that wheelhouse that I've gotten to know just a little bit. And again, I was pleasantly surprised. They track 4, give me it. I don't think I've heard him be that heavy.
Oh yeah.
And then dressing up is very funky and fun.
Yep.
And that's not to say that those two elements are happening anywhere else on the whole record, because they're also kind of, each song is just it's full of unexpected twists and turns and surprises. Exactly. And so 13 records for them. This is a special one for you. I'm assuming their stuff.
Oh yes, The Cure is. I mean, if I had to get rid of all of my records except for one band, it would be The Cure.
Damn.
And it's. I can always go back to a Cure album, love every song on it, sing every song on it, play every song on it, and find that place as a listener that the magic always happens. And it does not matter. And Robert Smith is, I know that it sounds, I don't think that Robert Smith gets the credit as a musician as he deserves, because one of the things is he's always being looked at as the goth, ultimate goth singer dude.
Not a lot of extra credit points in that,
exactly,
globally speaking.
Right. But the music and the production and the writing and the poetry and the guitar playing, all the things that he is as a musician are absolutely inspirational to me as a musician. So even back to the first record that, he even admits that he was trying to be more kind of like a even punkier version than Elvis Costello back at the time, right? It was very
mission accomplished. I think.
Yeah, the first record is that it's these odd little pop songs and angry little pop songs, like not quite punk, but have the energy. And then they go into the more dour stuff that gets more dour up through pornography. But the top came at a point in his career as a musician that, much like what this Tones on Tail thing is that he was trying to break his own mold. And he had gotten himself into this place after that pornography record where he went off and played, like he stopped doing The Cure. He went off and played guitar with Susie and the Banshees.
Okay.
And then decided to just kind of like do everything different. So he did this side project with Steve Severin from Susie and the Banshees called The Glove, which was like a prototype for the top. It was all this odd, weird music, a lot like this Tones on Tail thing, right? They're just trying to they just took a bunch of drugs and did a bunch of weird songs. And it was brilliant. And then he took what he learned from that and did a string of singles. There was Love Cats and Let's Go to Bed, and these kind of like, okay, if I'm going to do something as The Cure again, it's going to be completely different from before. And I don't give a shit anymore.
And mad respect.
I'm going to blow up my old image and I'm going to do this weird thing. And turns out everybody really dug it. And so he did this album, The Top, with those same musicians he had done those singles with, and kind of found a new definition of what he could do as a musician, which was, I don't have to just play all dirgy music. I can get really playful.
Another great word.
I can get really, really, like, I can explore jazz themes. I can explore, stuff that would be more non-traditional from the genre that I helped birth, right? And so The Top was just a giant experiment of that.
Wow.
And that's why I love that record so much. A lot of Cure fans dismiss The Top because it's exactly what I just described. It's not an entire album full of really heavy stuff, or it's an entire album of very playful stuff.
Huh.
And I've just always admired that he didn't take himself so seriously, that he could create this playfulness in the and have it balance the dour depressive stuff. And so from that point on, he then had a recipe. So the Head on the Door became a big hit because of In Between Days and Close to Me and the more poppier songs that are on that record. But it also has these big, dour, longer meditations that he had done on his earlier records, like on Faith, and then would continue to do up through Disintegration.
Okay.
Right? So...
the things that have really blown me away by checking out now 4 of theirs, track length, texture, and instrumentation.
Yeah.
Because this is Robert Smith and the Cure. This is what they look like. This is what they sound like.
Yep.
Just whatever. One CD is another CD, is another track, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, thank God I wasn't tweeting about that.
Well, I get it. And, because again, on the surface, what non-Cure fans see is these guys with this goofy hair.
Yeah.
And lipstick and like, what is up with that, right?
Yeah.
But
didn't you guys ever see a picture of Jimmy Page? That's how you're supposed to look, what I mean?
Yeah. So, but he's dedicated to that, and the music is... It really is. It's as timeless as anything in rock and roll.
It's pretty wild, man.
Right.
It really, I mean, they are, I hate to keep coming back to, a number of your releases having such value. But I mean, 13 records, there's probably not any that suck.
No.
I mean...
there are some... lesser successful records, and they come in later in the time period.
Well, but they definitely have earned a spot at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When you're discussing all-time greats.
Absolutely. I mean, totally agree.
So we'll move to the extreme end of your little window.
Yes.
1985. First and Last and Always, which is an amazing name for a record.
Yeah.
The Sisters of Mercy,
yes.
1985.
Yep.
First of 3. 10 tracks, 45 minutes. Singer-songwriter Andrew Eldritch, and a drum machine called Dr. Avalanche.
Yes.
The only points of continuity across those 3 records.
That's exactly right.
Which is just... wild.
So there is a special dark place in my heart for Sisters of Mercy. I've read multiple books about the band.
I love it.
And this album was this wasn't their debut record. They had multiple EPs and singles before this.
Okay.
So what had happened was Andrew Eldritch is a real character. He's almost like the anti-Robert Smith.
Interesting.
Which is funny because people, on the surface, you'd look at them in their prime and think that they were like brothers.
Huh.
But what Andrew Eldritch wanted to do was just go darker and darker and darker and darker.
Okay.
Right? And he wanted to do the same thing over and over and over and
over
again. So
buckle up.
Yeah. So what his goal was just to refine what he did to the nth degree. And so whether it was his vocals, whether it was the production, whatever, he just wanted to get darker and heavier and darker and heavier. And this record, and I could probably talk all night just about Sisters of Mercy. But the thing about them that makes this record so great, I'm just like sitting here admiring this album, this album art, is that the singularity of Andrew Eldritch's vision through the entire thing is what makes that band successful. And that if you look at the very first singles up through this one, they all look like they are all perfectly packaged the exact same way.
For real?
Absolutely. Not with the same artwork, but with the same fonts, the same feel.
I'm embarrassed to admit how appealing that is to me. I mean, that's I don't know if that's OCD or what it is,
Well,
but I like that.
Well, and that was kind of his thing. And whether or not he was ever diagnosed with OCD,
for me,
yeah,
liking something like that.
Well,
just,
yeah,
anyway.
and him that same way was like, he's going to create a consistent thread through everything that is that brand, that is that. So you can look at this and you can look at anything Sisters of Mercy and recognize that that is Sisters of Mercy.
You said that brand, maybe it's the birthplace of branding. I mean, so much online social media energy goes to
possibly
brand, anyway.
Yeah. But he was, for the longest time, doing it independently. He wasn't on. This was their first major label release. The other ones, and it was still licensed through his own publishing organization. So he had control through the whole way because he just wanted it to. He knew exactly what he wanted.
Nobody's going to mess with my stuff.
Nobody's going to mess with it.
Don't touch my stuff.
And that is why there were multiple people in the band through the entire thing, and the only consistent members were him and the drum machine.
Sure.
Right? Because he became very difficult to work with.
Oh.
Because he was, the mastermind.
See how,
Yeah. And I think he would admit that too. And the two albums that came out after this also had completely different lineups, different production values, different quality of songs, but it was always him. They just toured. They came to Kansas City.
Oh, cool. Did you check them out?
Oh, yeah, I was there.
Good time?
And, it's not presented in the way that I consider the classic Sisters of Mercy lineup to be, which was this album. It's a little bit more heavy metal.
Oh, interesting.
And a little bit more too reliant on backing tracks. But to hear those songs and to hear that voice of his, I mean, that's why you go.
Well, I had a similar but different experience in that Black Planet with the lead off. I was like, I don't love this, but I'm interested. And I was like, I also kind of hope that the rest of the record doesn't sound just like this. It departs from that track, and then everything else kind of seems a little bit more homogenous.
Right.
But each thing is also got its own twist to it.
Yeah.
So it was peculiar, and the other takeaway was that I almost wondered if he's trying to sound like David Bowie, because he sounds like him a lot in spots.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because we were talking about Bauhaus earlier, and Peter Murphy just completely aped David Bowie.
Oh,
right? That was his main thing. And there is a lot of that. So a lot of not even a lot, all of these bands, when they were forming in the late 70s, David Bowie was their leader, right?
Yeah.
David Bowie paved the way. Without David Bowie, none of these bands would exist, right? Because
that's crazy, man.
What David Bowie...
Because how huge is that list?
Massive. Of all the books that I have ever read about this era of music are these bands. If David Bowie had not happened, none of this would have happened.
That's great. Where else can you go? That also would have happened here and here. Not many spots. I mean, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you'd have to go back to say, there wouldn't have been the way the 60s developed without the Beatles, or the way the 50s developed without Elvis, right? There had to have been someone who was so wildly different from what came before to open the doors for everybody to do.
But look at the spotlight the Beatles had and that Elvis had, and then look at Bowie.
Yeah.
Like, he was always just kind of, what was that? Nothing. Just, and then you're older and you're like, oh my God. Right. I remember, I've said it on here before, I'd gotten to a spot where it's like, I think that I've heard every track the 101 The Fox could possibly play. And then one day, and it was one of those weird moments where I caught, the DJ didn't cut off any part of the beginning or the end, but I caught Space Oddity in a quiet moment, completely clean and uninterrupted. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like, I want to cry, and I'm anxious, and I'm so curious to know, it's like rooting through a dirty clothes hamper trying to find, and nothing is ever the same.
Yeah.
Just a perpetual reinventor and less spotlight, whether related or not. I don't know.
I would love to talk with Steve about this, since that you guys were talking about Bowie a bunch in last night or in the other one, but the interviews that I've seen of Bowie, he never really, he was doing what he did because he had no other choice, right? Meaning that it didn't matter if he was successful or not. He was going to do this, right? And so whether or not culture, society, whatever was ready for him or not, he was just going to do it.
That's
and
cool.
The right people always picked up on it,
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so great.
And so his influence came from people discovering it when they were ready for it. Right?
If we just had 2 more tracks.
Right.
When it's,
Precisely. And so all of these bands, and it wasn't just new wave music. It was, heavy metal was influenced by glam, which was David Bowie and T-Rex.
Right.
And Roxy Music, right? So things moved either to a heavier realm or a lighter realm, depending upon the audience and what the folks who were listening to that music wanted to how they wanted to take that influence and synthesize it into something else.
Right.
But it always comes back to Bowie. Always comes back to Bowie.
Man, again with the stamp of I got it on this band. One song, Get It On, Bang a Gong. Like, I heard that 4 billion times, and I was like, so fucking T-Rex sounds like Jesus. Yep. And there's a playlist that I sort of live and die with now that has a whole T-Rex album on it, and every time one of those tracks comes on, I'm like, holy fuck, who is? And I'm like, God damn, these guys are amazing. Yeah. And here I was just one hit, kind of that's them. And that's one record.
Yeah.
I haven't even looked any deeper. Yeah. But interesting that you brought them up with him.
I think that so T-Rex wasn't as popular in America for I don't know what reason, probably the same reason. But in England they were massive.
Shred.
Oh yeah, and they were
really groove. And jam.
It was they were again taking a bunch of things that shouldn't have fit together but did.
Huh.
And we could go on if we wanted to talk about how psychedelic music turned into space rock and how T-Rex is somewhere in the middle there and started to make glam happen. But that stuff was the prototype for what punk rock would become, what electronic music would become, what experimental music would become, what prog rock would become. Like, it all stemmed from that point in which that people wanted to do more with music.
Which is a great thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And all of these bands were kids or young people when they first saw David Bowie, and it changed, they will all say, oh, I saw David Bowie on Top of the Pops and it changed my life. All those bands, they wanted to do that. Yeah. So
thank you again for getting me that. Emmaline Twist's Instagram page is the best spot to keep tabs on what's happening with Emmaline Twist.
True.
And then the other outfits also have a digital presence.
That's right. So Monta has Instagram and a Facebook.
Okay.
And Static Phantoms. Go ahead. Sorry.
MANTA?
MONTA.
MONTA.
Right.
Okay.
Static Phantoms, which is the synth pop project. That's mostly active on Instagram. We actually just released a single last week.
Oh, fun! Congratulations.
Thanks. It's
Is that do they have a Bandcamp too?
Yes.
Where one can find. Okay.
All these bands are on Bandcamp.
Great.
And yeah, that's the musical projects that are active enough to. My ambient stuff doesn't have a. I don't do anything for that. That's just.
Okay. Not yet, anyway. Right.
It's not really. It's not meant to be a package like that. It's not meant to be a band.
It's an experience.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
So it's nice to not. It's nice to have that outside of. Oh, I gotta go promote this thing.
Right.
Or I gotta get T-shirts made for this thing.
Sure. Well, I've got 5 goofy questions for you, and
great.
I really need to add to the list
Oh.
because I'm just repeating, but
That's fine.
They still are fun a little bit for me anyway. So lunch or coffee or a cocktail, whatever, with anyone dead or alive, who are you choosing and why?
Oh, that would be David Lynch.
David Lynch. Wow. And man, the folks that love David Lynch love David Lynch, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's almost like diehard David Lynch fans aren't satisfied with the level of credit and recognition he's gotten for the work that he's done. Or I don't know, but it is something like a phenomenon, to quote De La Soul or Tribe Called, whoever that was.
I don't think David Lynch gives a shit.
No, of course not. Of course not. Of course he doesn't.
And which is brilliant. And I think that the people who really love him are totally fine knowing that he's an acquired taste. And he is brilliant, but he's hard to grasp if you don't want to go on that journey.
Okay.
Right. And because
Sure.
he's the
Well
challenge.
said.
Yeah. So because it's a challenge, the folks that really love him wear it as a badge of honor. I would actually say that it's a similar thing to people who enjoy Frank Zappa's work.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
Because-
You're absolutely right.
right?
You're absolutely right.
So it's like, and while I am not a huge fan of Frank Zappa's work, I love him as a creative person.
Sure.
And I love watching interviews with him because of his
That
intelligence.
YouTube rabbit hole is deep.
Oh yeah, so
and exciting and educational.
He was a brilliant man.
Absolutely.
And but so with David Lynch, it's the kind of thing that I've read enough books about him, and I've seen him in person, and I've seen all his films, and I've studied all his stuff, that he would be the kind of guy that I would like to sit down with and talk about anything other than his movies.
Of course.
Because it's like he's just that brilliant of a creative person that he doesn't want to talk about his
No,
films,
man.
right? Because the films are my experience.
Yeah.
And he's over it. He's done with that.
Yeah.
Right. But let's talk about old cars or what kind of, the coffee he makes.
I was
you know,
gonna say, how
yep.
does he take his coffee?
Precisely. That kind of stuff.
Did you watch Louis C.K.'s show Louis on FX?
No. Oh, was this when was David Lynch on there?
Yeah.
Okay. I never got to see that. I will have to go see it.
It was scrubbed from the internet, but he got it back from Fox for a limited time.
Oh yeah.
And all of his prices, like if you can buy all 7, I think, of his stand-up specials for $30 on his website, and Louis is there too. Maybe the best television show I've ever seen.
Awesome.
And I don't watch. The only one I would throw in there, it would be The Wire. Because I didn't watch The Sopranos or Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
Sure.
But it is really, really fantastic. All 5 seasons, just emotions all. And there's a spot in maybe season 3 where he's a pretty central figure to a handful of episodes.
Wow. Okay.
And it is so unnerving, and so compelling.
Yeah,
you can't look away. Like, and
that's his thing. That's
and most of
thing.
their scenes are like it's just the two of them having dialogue in a quasi dark room.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so awkward.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's just like when he walked onto I was like, get the fuck out of here. And then you could tell he's invested in this character. And it's really, he's just, I think, being himself.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
But
yeah,
man.
Anytime he's been in an acting situation, he's been just basically doing himself, kind of like Jeff Goldblum does.
yes. Well, again, fantastic show for an artist, a parent, anybody that's ever been in a relationship, anybody that's ever had opportunities around them. It just so good.
Cool.
You have the opportunity to visit your past self. What age are you choosing, and what are you saying?
Oh, man. That's a therapy question, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
I would go pretty far back.
Okay.
So being the nerdy outsider kid and also having been, there were points in my life where, didn't have father figure around and stuff. And I would go back to the version of me at that point who really needed to know that there was a really awesome future ahead.
God, if only.
Right?
Shit, dude.
Thinking about, especially being a parent now and having been there the entire time for my child, and despite the divorce and everything, my whole thing was to not make the same mistakes, and to learn from the fact that I wasn't a victim, right? I don't hold resentment towards my parents for what happened.
Of course not.
Of their lives, right?
But if there was a therapist in the room, they would definitely say that divorce is trauma.
Oh, sure.
So it's not nothing.
That's actually, and that's why that's why I'm saying that if I could go back and bolster that kid better, right? I could have probably had an easier time moving through the rougher points of my life. But at the same time, you think, well, whatever it was that trauma may or may not have happened, I found my way.
Yeah.
And so I got to hand it to myself.
Yeah.
So
I struggle. I don't visit as often as I used to, but Durango, where I went to school and had the radio show, all that, and newspaper, and a lot of good friends, was just a magical experience. And I got to go to college while doing it, and hone a lot of rough edges about myself.
Yeah.
And I bailed to come back to Kansas City for a very short-lived long-distance relationship, and it was an immediate move-in together kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't end bad, but it didn't work after a year and a half. And then I'm kind of fumbling through and met the woman that I would end up having kids with, which also ended in divorce, which thwarted my special purpose was I'm going to have a family and have kids and not get to, and well, that's not what was in the cards for, but so, I've always, that choice to come back and pursue that relationship. Like, I want to kick myself so hard for it, but I don't have the kids that I have if I don't do that.
Sure.
And there's a lot of other, smaller, parallels to that. It's large to me, right? Yeah. There's a lot of other where it's like, man, if only, and it's like, but look what, sort of like I didn't have anything going on and I was a nerd and whatever, but you were honing a lifelong craft.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree. Like I would hesitate to ever say, oh, if I could go back and change something.
Right.
I went through some shit.
Yeah.
And most of it was my own damn fault. But I don't blame anybody. I especially don't blame my parents who didn't know any better and who have worked hard to try to make up for those things. But it wouldn't have hurt to hear a little reassurance from my future self that, hey, it's all going to be cool.
Yeah.
So I suspected.
Pay yourself a random. Those are some really cool sneakers, my man. What?
Yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
how about that? Okay, complete this if you would for me, please. The world would become an immediately better place in which to live, if only.
I feel that the problems with the human race stem from everybody just not being cool with what they've got.
Wow.
Because if you were just cool with what you got, there you wouldn't be feeling like you had to compete with other people. You wouldn't feel like you had to get more than other people. You wouldn't have to feel like you had to be in front of the line of other people. You wouldn't feel like you had to be in a better political party or a better sports team or whatever, right? You wouldn't have to feel like something was lacking in yourself so badly that you had to take it from somebody else.
Very well said.
That's why the world is in the state it's in right now, because everybody's too fucking fixated on what they don't like about other people when they should just mind their own business.
And now, everybody meaning the whole world, or
The whole world.
or just our little pocket? of it?
Everybody.
Okay.
The whole world.
Well said, man.
And let me rephrase that. There are people in the world who get that and are totally fine living their life without being burdened by that, without being burdened by that sense of lack that drives people in the wrong manner. I think that in a capitalistic society such as ours, we're bred to feel like we have to have more than somebody else.
My daughter, dude, is like the three things: availability to go to Starbucks, and TikTok, and Lululemon clothes. And I'm just like, fuck, man, no. And but those are the measuring sticks, and I want to be like, there is so much more.
There is, and we all have to find that for ourselves.
I know.
That's the challenge.
I've never been patient,
Yeah,
so I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Have the answers now at 12 and show them to me.
But the challenge is, and we all know this as parents, is that there is more influencing the young minds of this world than just us. And
Much
it's
more.
unfortunate that it is being influenced mostly by, you're not good enough, you need more. You're not going to be happy or satisfied unless you have this.
It's a chapter in the book you were just talking about,
Yeah. So
and it's all, as opposed to finding that magazine in the music store in Tacoma and all of this like appealing to discover stuff. It's all being fed.
Yeah.
It's wild and not healthy. It's cool. I think it's way cooler when you gotta dig for it.
Oh yeah,
but
absolutely. The discovering is by going through the act of discovery, you are leading with curiosity.
Yes.
You're saying what else is there?
Right.
Right. And there's a sense of optimism. What could be? Not, oh, this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. This is the stuff. I gotta consume this. I gotta do this. I gotta be measured by this. But if you say, well, what else is there? How else can I find something? How else can I express myself? This is what David Bowie did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? This is what people who pave the way or trailblaze in the ways that they do are not satisfied with just being okay with everybody saying this is what there is.
Right.
So,
is there a band or a song that when they or it comes on, you want to leave the room?
Leave the room in a bad way?
Yeah, like I just can't with this song or with these guys.
Back to your statement earlier about how when we were younger we might have had music snobbery. That would have been the case in the past.
Okay.
I don't feel that way now because I can look at those things and say, you know what, this is obviously there because it brings somebody joy.
Man,
and
awesome.
And I can appreciate that.
That's
I may not personally want to listen to it.
Right.
And there are certainly times where like, oh my God, I hate that song. Why is it stuck in my head? That's my own personal preference, but I'm not going to be like, take that joy from somebody else.
Right. It's so weird. The concept of songs getting stuck in your head. Now I have things that trigger riffs, and it's not always pleasant. Like if I hear the word Fogerty or Creedence, I get immediately the Susie Q rip, and I can't do anything about it. I can go 6 days or 6 months between, but as soon as and I played the shit out of my Creedence Greatest Hits cassette and loved every minute of it, and now I'm just like, oh God. I mean, and I still respect them a lot, but it's anyway. Okay, last but not least, true or false? It's okay to wear the shirt of the band whose show you're going to.
This is where I can be a music snob, and it is false, except there's one, and this is the one exception. Okay. And I would not have thought this until I saw it with my own eyes. So, yes, I personally would never wear the band shirt, but I have performed and seen people in the crowd wearing my shirts.
Okay.
And that's 100% totally cool.
I should have seen that coming.
Because again, I'm not going to take that joy away from that person. I wouldn't do it, but I'm not going to pee on somebody else's parade.
Okay.
Now, there's a major example in which I've seen this and been okay with it. And it's so years ago, Iron Maiden was playing at the Sprint Center.
Wow.
And my cousin, the cousin I mentioned earlier who got me into heavy metal in the first place, had flown out here to hang out with his buddy and go to this concert. And he's like, hey, we're going to be down in this place called Power and Light. You should come down and have a beer. So I went down there, and I think I was wearing, because I didn't want to look like I was a non-heavy metal fan. So I was wearing a Red Fang t-shirt. And so I'm walking in there, and the entirety of Power and Light, everybody in there, thousands of people are at Power and Light going over to Sprint Center. Every single one of them was wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt.
That's crazy.
And when I met up with my cousin, he was wearing one too. And that particular fan base wears those shirts as a badge of honor, because what they were doing... It's
unique to Iron Maiden fans?
Well, I don't know if it's unique to Iron Maiden fans, but this was the first time I'd ever seen everybody wearing them. And what he was telling me is that because they've been around for so long and they've done so many tours, that if you've got a shirt from as far back as you can go,
you're the president of our organization.
Precisely. That's like street cred.
Well, it's fascinating because I never have really lived in the metal lane. I've peeked into it a couple times. I barely listened to it. My cousin turned me on to Iron Maiden. I barely listened to any, but I always wanted to keep tabs on the cover art of the newest record because it was fascinating and fun. It was always Eddie's doing this now. Yeah. So I can see how that would be. Well,
it's similar to the Sisters of Mercy theme, right? They've got a thing. Yeah. And that every tour they'd have different, like multiple different shirts that would be on theme for that album or that particular tour or whatever. And so it create in that environment, it was creating that much stronger a sense of community. Hey, I was at that show. That's my favorite record. Oh, here's the tour dates on the back. I was at this show, right? That kind of thing. And because it's part of the experience of following the band. You know, when people follow bands, this is a thing they do, right? Grateful Dead fans trade mixtapes and this and that. Whatever it is, the cultural thing that gives you some cachet that says, I experienced this then, and this is the depth of my fandom, which is really cool. Now, some of these bands that I would go see now from the olden days, I would probably wear their shirt, because if I still had my Head on the Door concert shirt, I would have worn it to that Cure show at Starlight a couple of years ago.
Oh wow, okay.
Just because, like, again, it's that same thing. Yeah. I was there. This is this particular version of it, but if it was a contemporary band, I wouldn't do it. If it was a contemporary band, I wouldn't do it because we're all there, right? We're all there. This band's only got 2 records. So what, right?
Yeah.
That said, as a musician, when I see somebody wearing one of my shirts,
that's cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we played Saturday night. There were at least 2 people wearing shirts.
Hell yeah.
And you know what? I appreciate that.
Heck
because
yeah.
I know that they have made, especially as a local band, they made the effort to come out to that show, and they didn't have to.
Right.
They could have stayed at home. And not only that, they're wearing my damn shirt.
Nice.
I'm not going to poo-poo that. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And so I again, it comes down to what's the situation.
Yeah.
I think the rule of thumb is don't, but in special cases you can. It's acceptable.
It gives me joy to ask the question.
Yeah.
So, and I was telling this to the dudes on Saturday. Just a few weeks ago, I was out in Colorado seeing my 81st and 82nd Fish shows.
Oh wow!
And the dude that I was seeing him with, I've seen 40 plus of those with him. And I am who I am, and he'll visor and t-shirt, double down.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this fucking guy. But I love him to death.
Yeah.
And we go together, and live together for a week and see 3 shows or whatever it is. And anyway, it's just, I love it.
I think that there's something that happens when a musical act becomes as established as, for example, a sports team.
Right.
Like, you're not going to see Chiefs fans who are underdressed in Chiefs gear.
Right.
Right? The whole point is to show how big of a fan you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You want to go and say, I'm in this.
Yeah.
But there are few bands that get to that level.
Right. Well,
and any band that does 82 shows in 1 year, how long?
No. I've been seeing them since '94.
Okay.
I've managed to see them 82 times.
They've probably played thousands of shows.
Oh yeah,
right?
There are people that have seen them 300 and 400 times. It's like,
when something becomes an institution, I think the rules change. Right.
Fair enough.
And I think that it's just it. I think who am I going to go see coming up? Okay, I'm going to go see this band called Nation of Language in a couple of weeks. And they're a relatively new band. They've been out for a few years, but they only have like 3 records.
Okay.
If I walked in wearing a Nation of Language t-shirt, I would be corny.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're a world touring band. And everybody there is already in on the secret. Everybody there is already in on it, right? It doesn't feel like you have to overdo it.
Right.
You don't have to prove anything.
Right.
You're already there.
The argument that I always say for answering this question with false is the fact that we're all here together shows that we're into. So use this opportunity to show me what else you're into, man.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, and that's. I mean, I'm wearing this. The Monta opened up for Twin Tribes last week. I've been waiting to wear this shirt.
Nice.
Right? Wasn't going to wear it to the Twin Tribe show.
Right.
If I went to another city to see them. That said, there were plenty of their fans there who did have their shirts on.
I mean,
that's cool. Again, I'm not going to be the guy that says that that's not the right thing to do.
Right.
I just wouldn't do it.
So one question I forgot to ask, and then we got to get you out of here.
Yeah.
Emmaline Twist, which is Emmaline, and then second word Twist. I meant to ask you the origin story of the name.
Okay, that's a good one. The there's something that happens with every band when they're just starting out, which is you have to figure out what you're going to call yourself. And most of my bands, the names have come pretty easily. It was hard to come up with a band name for Abandoned Bells because we weren't sure what we had messed around with a couple of names, and the Late Night Callers was an instant name that just it fit instantly, and there was no hemming about it or anything. So I guess I was working from home or something, or I don't even remember because I don't have a TV. I can't remember how I saw this, but there was some news article on the TV. Maybe I clicked on it by mistake or something about this Airbnb or this bed and breakfast place up in the Northeast that this couple had opened up, and it was in one of those mansions up in the Northeast, and they were talking about how it was haunted. So maybe it's around Halloween. I don't know.
Okay,
but so the news article was talking about this haunted bed and breakfast up in the Northeast, and so the owner was talking about the owners of the house, and it apparently was owned by a judge back in the late 1800s, a judge and his wife who moved out here from the Northeast, like Maine or something, and the wife was a business person. Like she was like the president of the first female bank president in Kansas City, or like a woman's bank or something like that. Something really particular she was, a forward-facing woman.
Yeah,
times,
pioneer.
Right?
Yeah,
and they said it was. They said their names, and I wasn't watching, so I didn't see any print of it. But I wasn't watching, and so I heard them say. It was owned by Judge Samuel and his wife, Emmaline Twist. And I heard it as Emmaline Twist, but it was spelled Twiss, I later found out. And Emmaline was spelled differently, too. And I'm like, whoa, that's a cool name.
Right?
Emmaline Twist, wow. That sounds awesome. And she was this banker. I mean, that's pretty cool, right, for the times. So I brought it to the band, and I'm like, how about this? And everybody just was, there was only 4 of us at the time. We hadn't had our 5th member join yet. And everybody was like, oh, that's cool. And then, the abbreviation is the ET, which kind of gets into our space theme stuff. So, yeah, so that's
very cool.
That's how that came
very
about.
cool. I apologize if that was in one of those articles that you're
I don't know.
linked to, but I didn't recall seeing it. So
I don't think it was. I think that's the kind of thing that everybody that usually gets asked rather than written about.
Right. Well, so the Emmaline Twist Instagram page, the Bandcamp has the 4 releases that we talked about, as well as merch. And then Monta, Monta, also has a Bandcamp and an Instagram.
Yes.
And I already forgot the other outfit's name.
Static Phantoms. Correct.
Also has social media and a Bandcamp.
That's correct.
Okay. Man, I really appreciate it. It's a little bit late in the evening for somebody that has a drive home. But this has been a blast, and I'm really glad that you made the time and made the trip. So thank you.
Blair. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad. I love your other episodes, and I'm glad to be included in this esteemed list of folks. So.
As you point to that, you pointed to it earlier in talking about things that. I forget the specific thing, but things that folks went through during COVID, and really a lot of variety. I mean, you've folks that were prepared to open a venue and had to scramble, and a lot of folks in the hospitality industry that had to pivot and figure stuff. Folks in bands. I had one guest on here who had both parents die back to back. And it was during pandemic, but not necessarily COVID, but just, most everything you could think of. And it's sort of like experiencing the pandemic is the common denominator for all of us. Anyway, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
This was great.
Bye.
Thank you. So much fun.